I'm walking along what was once an ancient coastal path here in North Norfolk. The Wash is just over there somewhere. And 1900 years ago, all of this would have been beach and it would have been full of Romans. But they wouldn't have been working on their tans. They'd have been emptying the cargo boats, which supplied a massive fort, which was over there somewhere. This fort was called Branadunum. But we don't know how much of it survives, what it originally looked like, and whether it was one of the key outposts of the Roman Empire.
It is an incredible structure. We can see the wall exactly as it was put up by the Romans, what, 2,000 years ago.
We're stretched to the limit coping with all the finds.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic.
And astonished by the images from underground. It's a very big site we're going to dig this week, over 20 acres. So can we uncover the story of 250 years of Roman occupation here at Branadunum in just 3 days? Who knows? The Romans invaded Britain in the middle of the 1st century AD, and by the 2nd century, they'd taken control of the eastern coastline. This Roman shore fort at Branadunum must have dominated all that went on here. What's brought us to this National Trust site are these aerial photos, which show strange crop marks in 3 fields across the site. They're tantalising clues to the size and scale of the lost Roman fort and town that are just waiting to be discovered. Roman Branadunum could even have been bigger than modern-day Brancaster. But if it is as huge as it looks, why was it built in this far-flung corner of Norfolk? And what exactly was here? Time Team's Francis Pryor is itching to get started. A lovely summer's day in a grassy meadow.
Well, we're not on holiday, Tony.
No, that's true.
Yeah, it is a lovely grassy meadow, but it's also a Roman fort. And this place is stiff with archaeology.
What's so special about this place?
Well, I mean, look over there, OK? That is what is showing up on the aerial photograph, those crop marks. That's a small town. I don't think I've ever been on a time team that has so many crop marks.
Well, don't get carried away. They're a little bit blurred.
Well, they are, but for you, I've plotted them out. So there are the crop marks of the town. Here's the Roman fort.
It is huge, isn't it? You are right. There's a heck of a lot.
It is vast, Tony.
It's 24 acres in all, and John Gator's Geophys team have been busy. The crop marks suggest there's a huge fort and next door a vicus or settlement. For the last 12 hours, they've been scanning the fort's interior with magnetic sensors. And their brand new towable radar technology should tell us if those crop marks are actually indicating Roman buildings still in the ground. But the techie team are struggling. Jimmy's kit loses a vital part.
That'll teach me to make sure that everything's tightened up before we start, won't it?
And Emma's computer is misbehaving too. Things aren't going well for Geophys.
Well, we've got problems with Emma downloading the data.
Yeah.
The wheel's just fallen off the radar.
But you have managed to do some, Mag.
I've got results, and basically what we've done is we've refined the aerial photographs so we can pinpoint things accurately on the ground. We've done a bit over the Principia.
Yeah.
And then a bit over this building that's on a different alignment.
He says Principia. Presumably that just means the main building, does it?
Yeah, that's basically the headquarters building, the command building.
But we don't know anything about this second one.
No, we don't. And I want to get a trench in both those buildings because we can't hang around. I mean, while his wheels are dropping off, you know, time is passing. I'm getting a bit anxious, Tony.
OK, so where are we going to put in the trench?
I am going to put the first trench here. That is where we are going to get the most important datable find.
While the Geophys team refocus their efforts, Phil takes command of the Principia trench, which in no time delivers the telltale sign of Roman daily life.
Must be Roman oyster shells.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Look at that, didn't they love their oysters?
Roman lunch.
I'd be convinced that's Roman. Let's be honest, Francis. Oysters are the sort of thing that would get really, really worked and churned and broken up in a plough soil.
Yeah.
These are surviving.
No, I mean, that's
in good condition.
That's very encouraging, Phil. It really is.
Francis's second trench is just 50 metres away. The geophys suggests it's out of kilter with the straight lines of the main fort. Matt Williams and Cassie Newland will be trying to find out just what this mystery building is. The fort here has been known about for centuries. It was built by the Romans to defend Britain against marauding Saxons coming over the North Sea. But was Branadunum's purpose purely defensive? David Gurney has studied Roman sites all over Norfolk and has got some intriguing ideas about this particular shore fort. Ever anybody talks about a Roman fort, I think of something that's crammed full of soldiers who leap out whenever there's anyone charging across the country and then nip back into the fort again. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about?
I think at Branadunum it's more complicated than that. I think it possibly starts off with some trading and then it may become more defensive, with a more military function, and then towards the end, again, possibly more trading.
You said shore forts, so does that mean there was more than one?
Oh yes, if we've got a map here of the 11 forts. So we've got Branadunum up there at the north end by the Wash, and then we've got 11 forts around the coast, ending up with Portchester down by the Isle of Wight.
So we do know that whatever Branadunum's function was, it was part of an overall strategy.
This is the Roman military having a very serious attempt to defend the coast of Britain and possibly doing this trading stuff as well.
So according to David, Branadunum was built for invading Roman soldiers, but alongside that, it developed into an important trading hub. Probably importing supplies they could trade locally for goods they could export. We're hoping that Dig will shed more light on this dual role. Inside the fort walls, Phil's excavating the larger of the two buildings, which is the HQ, or Principia. We know it was stone-built because there's an account of a clergyman who in the 1800s was robbing stone from here to extend his nearby mansion. He even dug and took stone from below the ground.
I was a bit worried that everything would have been nicked by the robbing reverend.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have taken everything. I'm sure he'd have left something for us.
The team have hit a layer of material that looks like a Roman demolition dump.
Yo!
But amongst this, Tracy's found a real surprise.
Hold your paw out. There you go.
Oh, wow.
Told you.
That is really nice, isn't it, eh?
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
It looks like a dice, isn't it? It's got rather more than the requisite number of dots.
It has.
3, 6, 9 dots there, 3 dots there.
Cross on the back.
Cross on there. That is rather splendid.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Just 3 hours into our dig and finds are coming out of both trenches. The pottery Ian's found was made in Britain for the Romans who lived here.
I reckon looking at that rim, it's got to be more like second, third, probably more likely third, actually.
Fantastic.
And in Phil's trench, they're now digging through the layer of rubble from when the building was demolished. And that too is full of surprises. With such a wealth of artefacts coming out of the ground, we've brought in the British Museum's Roman finds expert, Philippa Walton.
So what have you got here for me then, Phil?
Well, it looks very much like what we've got is a large pewter plate.
It does look like a pewter bowl to me.
Looking at it as an object, it is definitely Roman, is it?
Yeah, definitely Roman. Late Roman, 4th century.
So what sort of people would be using this? Is it the sort of thing you expect on a military site?
Well, they're very unusual finds, but it's not something that wouldn't come up in a military context. Brilliant. That is amazing. That's the first pewter vessel I've ever held.
Is that really?
Yeah. They're really rare, Phil. They really are.
So this plate from the 4th century is from the last 50 or so years of the fort's occupation, possibly even just before the Romans withdrew from Britain. Let's hope the finds keep coming and that we start to uncover the buildings within the fort's walls. Roman forts in Britain share similar characteristics. As well as a Principia, they'd have a commandant's house and barracks, bathhouses, granaries, a guest house, and even workshops, almost as if they were built in kit form. But we've got no idea whether our fort has got all of these components. It's big enough, and the finds in our trenches are certainly building a picture of a bustling military fort. We now think the dice found in the Principia may be from a strategic board game played by soldiers whiling away their time. It's a wonky old shape, it looks pretty dodgy. You'd want to be in control of this game, wouldn't you?
You would.
But what about the bigger picture?
Well, the bigger picture, Tony, is that this trench that we thought was relatively straightforward this morning is vastly more complicated than we imagined.
John, have you got that geophys?
I don't think you wanted to see the geophysics, did you? You didn't need to? No. I mean, because you said on the crop marks we could see that we've got the main buildings and very little else.
That's good enough.
Look at what Graham's done magnetically.
Isn't that fantastic?
Incredible.
He's surveyed the whole fort now. I mean, we've got the main defences, we've got the main Principia building, we've got these responses that I've not seen the like of before. It is such an amazing picture.
But that's magnetic. I mean, what's Jimmy been doing his much-beloved radar then?
Look at that.
Oh, wow.
There's clear picture, the Principia.
That's not radar, is it?
That is the radar over the main building.
So we've got rooms over the main building which no one's ever seen before.
Now you say there's rooms there that we haven't seen before. I think that we can actually see these walls appearing in the bottom of our trench.
And look, over here you've got the Principia, of course, and then look at that. I mean, I think that could be a granary. I mean, over here we might have the gatehouse and these buildings along here.
You've got a heck of a lot of choices available to you tomorrow, haven't you?
No, it's really worrying, Tony, because I think these decisions are actually going to be very important. I mean, you know, what we decide tomorrow is going to be important for another 50 years, you know, and it's going to sort out the dating.
So we've got just about the best geophys we've ever had on a Roman site. We've got fantastic finds, we've got loads of choices. What are we going to do? I think there's going to be a lot of thinking tonight at the hotel, not just drinking. And it's all your fault. Beginning of day 2 here in Branadunum in North Norfolk, where we're looking for a Roman fort. Well, I say looking for one. Look at that. We found a Roman fort, that fantastic geophys that John's done, and that is radar there. So we've got an enormous number of potential places where we can dig, and you've been racking your brains all night about where to put one in. So where's it going to be?
Well, to be quite honest, Tony, I haven't slept a wink. All I can imagine, you know, are granaries, are barrack blocks, it's just buildings everywhere. It's been a nightmare. There are so many targets.
And where are you going to dig?
I want to put a trench across the seaward defences.
This is so archaeology, isn't it? You've got this great proliferation of information all over this page, and you want to do something right up the top there.
But it's not going to be a little thing, Tony. I want to go right across the defences and then come back through these buildings here. I promise you, a good big trench.
But before the digger makes the first cut, the new towable radar kit makes a sweep around where the trench is going in. With luck, this much higher definition underground imaging system will tell us more about the buildings and fort ramparts under the ground here. The ramparts themselves run for 50 metres in each direction.
I suspect we'll start hitting that rubble like they did in Trench 1.
And we're hoping we can discover how they were constructed and when. Already, Rakshar and Ian have exposed what looks like a wall.
Yeah! Oh, Ian, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So that must be the footing for the wall there then?
Absolutely. Mwah! Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
It's the first hint of an intact stone structure. Yesterday, the geophys results astounded everyone. The conditions in the ground are well drained and particularly good for their scanners. So now they've decided to extend their survey to see how much of the 24-acre site they can cover. We also opened 2 trenches yesterday, one over a mystery building that we want to identify, the other over the fort's HQ building or Principia. As well as finds expert Philippa Walton, we've also called in Roman historian Mark Corney to assess the finds as they come out of the ground. At the Principia trench, Tracy's found a metal object.
It looks like a squashed nail almost. I don't know, Mark.
It's all right. I'll tell you what it is. It's a stylus.
No.
A writing implement, yeah. We've got the wedge end there.
Right.
We've lost about that much off the bottom, which would have been the point.
The stylus was used to inscribe onto wax tablets, and it was how Branadunum's officials would have recorded military orders and business transactions.
Good God, I've never seen one made of iron.
Yeah, you get them in iron as well as bronze, but that is definitely a stylus.
Wow.
And it's from the Principia, which is the administrative part of the fort. It's evidence of Roman army bureaucracy.
And there was plenty to administer. The crop marks are clues that there was a big settlement just to the east of our site. We know there was one of a similar size to the west, because in the 1970s, a housing estate was built right on top of it. And while it was being excavated, archaeologists found important evidence of one of the cavalry units or cohorts. So who exactly were stationed here?
We're very fortunate, actually. We've got the names of 2 military units, which are probably the only 2 that were here. We've got from earlier excavations these stamped bricks, and they give us the name of the unit. CH for cohort 1, the numeral, then AQ for Aquitanum, the first cohort of Aquitanians from southwestern France, and they're probably the ones responsible for building the fort. By the 4th century AD, we've got this lovely document, the Notitia Dignitatum, and it tells us that we've got a cavalry regiment of Dalmatians. So that's from the modern-day Adriatic coast, what used to be Yugoslavia. It's a real cosmopolitan empire.
So it wasn't just soldiers from Rome. There were units from other ethnic groups that had been swallowed up by the expansion of the Roman Empire. Mark thinks that at one time there were 500 soldiers here. And in the Principia trench, they're uncovering finds that tell us more about those who were here 1900 years ago, including something crucial for any well-dressed Roman soldier.
Oh, what you got there? Oh, that's rather nice, isn't it? Well, I don't know what it is, but I know somebody who might. Philippa?
What have you found now then,
Well, it's
Phil?
not what I found, it's what Angus has just found.
Oh, wow, that's nice. What it is, it's a strap end.
So if
belt fitting, it would strengthen your belt.
it's the bit that goes on there then.
But a bit of a slimmer one.
Well, that's right, but as for a slimmer person, I suppose.
Yes, maybe.
I don't like to keep on harping on about it, but is it the sort of thing you'd expect to find on a Roman fort?
Definitely, this is something a soldier might have worn.
Go and find a soldier.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you never know, do you?
Keep digging.
Yeah.
Finds aren't just confined to the trenches. Metal detectors combing our huge spoil heaps are unearthing lots of tiny finds with big stories.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic.
Some local tribes had been producing coins in Britain, but when the Romans arrived, their administrators soon put a stop to that. By 155 AD, the Romans were minting their own coins, and these are what we're finding.
Looks like you've got another coin here, Tracy.
Yeah, I mean, this has come off the spoil heap again, but we do know where it's come from, and that's the layer that we're doing at the moment. But it looks a bit different from the one we had.
Yeah, can I take a closer look? Okay. Yeah, it's 4th century in date, and the reverse shows a soldier spearing a fallen horseman.
Yeah.
And we can date this one quite specifically to the period 355 to 361.
Nice.
So it's the sort of same period as the pottery coming out of that trench.
Well,
as
that makes sense. Brilliant.
There you go.
The 40 or so coins we've found could have been changing hands for all sorts of goods and services. As Branadunum was the northernmost outpost of the Romans' east coast defences, and with no major roads leading here, the sea would have been vital for trade and travel. And back then, it's likely that the coastline would have been much closer to Branadunum than it is today. Francis has sent local archaeologist David Gurney and me on a mission to get a better understanding of what it was like here when the shore fort was in full swing. David, clearly this is navigable, but we are pretty far out from the shoreline.
Well, it's a very dynamic coastline and it's changed any number of times over the centuries. We can see this is mostly salt marsh now, but it would have been more open in the Roman period.
Oh, so you think that the Roman ships would have been able to get nearer?
I think there would have been quite a wide channel getting fairly close to the fort.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it, on a peaceful day like today, what this must have been like nearly 2,000 years ago, when it would have been chaos here with all those ships and soldiers and people.
Absolutely bustling, yes, really busy. Endless numbers of boats coming and going.
The Romans used boats that could carry up to 50 tons at a time. They had flat bottoms and were ideal for navigating coastal waters and rivers. And they didn't require a man-made dock or jetty. They could easily be beached on a high tide and their cargoes unloaded as the tide went out. It's only day 2 and we've got an astonishing volume of archaeology, over 2,500 pieces in all, that tell us about everything from Roman sports to the decorative arts. All these finds, guys, and still they keep coming. That's what's so great about Roman archaeology, isn't it?
It's brilliant. The Romans make a load of rubbish and a lot of datable rubbish too. So we've got lots of late Roman pottery here. We've got roof tiles and we've got some really nice, beautiful small finds.
So what are your favourites?
Oh, well, I really like this bit of Samian ware that's got 2 little men boxing on it. It's really beautiful.
It's odd that they're boxing because they seem to be facing in the same direction. It looks as though one's punching the other in the back.
Yeah, well, violent Romans.
Why have you chosen a couple of bones?
Well, usually on archaeological sites you concentrate on the bones for looking at what people were eating. But these are actually cockerel spurs, and that might tell us that people in the fort were doing a little bit of cockfighting in their spare time.
Cockfighting was among the many things the Romans introduced to Britain. Even Julius Caesar was an enthusiast. Yesterday, we opened our second trench over the smaller of the 2 buildings in the fort. It seems to be built on a different angle to the walls and the Principia building. Now we have a visible wall, so we can measure just how misaligned it is.
As for Emma, did you manage to get the alignments on our wall of our squiffy building? It's about 20 degrees off the outer fort's walls. So we've got what's on the crop mark, basically? Yep, it's definitely on the same alignment.
We know the Romans built settlements and forts in straight parallel lines, so why does this fort seem to defy the laws of Roman town planning?
David, we always think of the Romans as marching in straight lines and at right angles.
Yeah.
And in Trench 2, it looks like the building isn't lined up on the fort. What do you think that means?
Well, you're quite right. We've got straight lines, but they're not all in the same degree of straightness, as it were. I mean, looking at the air photos and now the geophysics, of course, we can see that the building in Trench 2 looks as though it's on the same alignment as the main road that goes through the Vicus. And therefore, it raises the question as to whether or not it's an earlier building than the fort we've seen in Trench 1.
So does that make sense to you, Mark?
On one hand, it does. However, some of the other big shore forts in Britain, like Richborough and Lymm in Kent, you do get contemporary buildings which are misaligned to the fort defences. So, you know, pay your money, you take your choice, really.
Some of the stone rubble coming out of the trenches could help us begin to paint a picture of what the fort's walls might have looked like.
This is the grey stone that the buildings are made out of.
Over the centuries, the fort's stonework was systematically removed by robbers. It was such a high-quality building stone that it was reused in buildings that can still be seen in Brancaster today. But that wasn't the first time this stone was relocated. It's been discovered that this carstone or grey stone is unique to a quarry at Castle Rising. And it's now believed that the stone was transported 25 miles by sea to Branadunum. And that would have involved well over 500 boatloads just to get the stone to site. In the trench spanning the ramparts, they can finally see the foundations of the fort's huge defences. Now, Matt, Mark and David are piecing together just how Branadunum's ramparts were built.
So we've got a nice wide foundation here, about 10 foot wide, which is about right. How far down does it go?
Well, just below you there, it's at least 3 courses, so maybe, 30 centimetres or so.
And is that a bit of grey stone right at the bottom?
Right at the very bottom, it looks like there's a little piece left, which means, they didn't manage to get it all out.
So if that grey stone is in situ, what we're actually seeing here is the robbed face of the wall.
Yeah, so this would have actually been the face out this way.
So this stuff is what's left of what came off that surface.
Can you imagine what it would have looked like, built from that freshly quarried, very pale grey white stone, perhaps 5-6 metres high, and, when viewed from offshore, it's going to dominate the skyline.
Branadunum's starting to look like a cut above the average Roman shore fort. Built with the finest stone, it was a statement of money and power, and a sign the Romans were here to stay. It's a significant piece of evidence which suggests Branadunum was more important than was previously thought. But we're halfway through our dig and we still need to find out exactly what went on inside the fort and how long it stood here. We're here at Branadunum, digging a Roman site on the Norfolk coast. We've just a day and a half left to discover the extent of the buildings inside the fort. We could be on the brink of uncovering one of the most impressive shore forts on Britain's east coast. So far, the Geophys team have had such a success that they're now attempting to scan the entire site. We want to find the earliest version of the fort and what other buildings might be hidden here. John's latest results over the fort's HQ, or Principia, not only show that it was a huge building 40 metres across, but also suggest there could be a chamber below the ground floor.
So that's the detailed radar plot.
Oh, I like it. So what we're really saying then is that in between these two walls, we've got basically an underground room that goes down 2 metres.
You've certainly got a greater depth of deposits here, yes.
OK, so the archaeology is beginning to look as though it's backing up what you got on the geophysics.
So you're starting to believe me?
No, absolutely. I never doubted you for one moment, John.
There's a chance that the chamber could be undisturbed, unlike much of the site, which over the centuries has been ravaged by stone robbers who've removed most of the fort's stonework. Geophys have also been surveying in the field to the north, where the crop marks that we've highlighted are less distinct. This could be the site of a much earlier fort, where the first Romans landed their boats and established a base. But do these Geophys results reveal anything new?
Well, look, these are the latest results. I mean, we've got a complex of ditches, road systems coming across. If I didn't know better, I'd have said we've got a fort.
Where is it?
Well, there's our main fort, and that's the field to the north.
You've got to put something in there, haven't you?
Absolutely, Tony. What's worrying me is that we've got a little bit of today left, and then it's just tomorrow. I mean, that's a tall order. We'll really have to get cracking.
But you want to go for it?
Oh, yeah.
So if the North Field turns out to be the site of an earlier fort, it would imply that a pioneering Roman unit was sent ahead, and the development of Branadunum and its much larger fort was a gradual process.
OK, in. Top off.
It's 20 years since Francis and his old comrade David Gurney dug trenches together.
We need to get into that ditch, don't we?
We do.
I'll get my shovel and I've got my trowel. There's my trowel. Yes, I'm ready to go.
When the Romans arrived, they'd have discovered land ripe for agricultural development. Finds from the 1970s dig nearby tell us they were producing grain. 2,000 or so people lived here, and the soldiers and officials, at least, could have been living very well indeed. The bones Naomi has been discovering tell us something of what was on the dinner table. Not only have we got loads of pottery and loads of coins, but we've also got shed loads of bone, haven't we?
Tons and tons of animal bone, really nicely preserved animal bone, so it's keeping me happy.
So what have we got?
Well, we've got our typical Roman species, some horn cores there from a cow. We have pig, which is typical for military sites. We also have quite a lot of sheep. And we've got quite a few jaws.
Do you think they'd have been prepared on site?
Yes, I do, Tony, because we've got quite a range of butchery. For example, here, we've got a nice piece of butchery. It's been sheared off here, perhaps with a cleaver, something like that. Down to more fine knife marks for filleting and skinning and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, processing on site.
And the pottery is sort of confirming all the food preparation as well. We've got the classic mortarium, the mixing bowl for preparing pastes and things like that. We've got the cooking pots. And finally, we've got the best Sunday china from which you eat your nice lamb casserole. This is from a nice sort of shallow bowl that would have been about this size.
It may have been a far outpost of the Roman Empire, but they didn't go without. To give our team a taste of what they would have eaten here, food and drink expert Sally Granger and I have been conscripted to prepare some delectable offerings. The Romans loved oysters, and the abundance of empty shells we've been finding here tell us that the Romans were eating them as a staple. So we'll be serving up some locally harvested Brancaster oysters. I got it through anyway. Hey!
Lovely. Oh, don't they look juicy?
Complete with a favourite accompaniment, a sauce made from rotted, fermented, oily fish called garum, imported from the Mediterranean.
It's black. It's pitch black. There's no light penetrating that at all. Now we're going to try some of this with a raw oyster.
It smells like the fertiliser that my dad used to put on the garden in the 1950s. Our pig bone discovery tells us that some of Branadunum's residents were well-to-do, because to the Romans, pork was a delicacy. So we've prepared some pork kebabs, spiced with coriander and cumin, which arrived here by boat from all over the Roman Empire, along with exotic oils and favourite wines.
Good smell, isn't it?
While we crack on with the cooking, time's running out for the team looking for a possible earlier fort in the field nearest to the sea. But Ian makes an all-important end-of-day find.
Hi, David. Hi. Well, we've got some, finally got a few little bits of pot down there. But it doesn't look Roman to me.
Wow, look at these. At first glance, no, I think you're right. These two, they've got flint gritting. Yep. I think those are well and truly Iron Age.
Cool.
Possibly 1st, 2nd century BC.
Right.
And this one, that looks a little bit later. So I'd place that sort of 1st century BC, possibly just into the AD. Where were these from?
Well, they're from this lower fill down here in the ditch, but there's no sign of any Roman in this ditch at all.
No.
That's not bad going.
So is this enclosure going to be Iron Age? We will find out tomorrow.
This pottery predates the Roman invasion. But before any history books are rewritten, they'll need more evidence from the trench if they're going to challenge the theory that there was an earlier Roman fort on this part of the site.
Roman dinner is ready.
Now it's the end of day and time for kebabs Roman style. But this lot are more interested in a Branadunum brew. Romans actually have beer.
Oh, I should hope so. Weren't they a bit posh for that, though? Wasn't it a bit of a wine thing?
No, of course they weren't. There were working-class Romans who would have drunk beer as well.
I think the officers would probably have drunk wine.
Then in that case...
No, no!
God, you're really gripping that!
Next, the oysters. Posh nosh for us.
Thank you very much.
But here in Roman times, they were foraged and freely available.
Well, I guess when the Romans came here, they must have been absolutely...
They fell on their feet, yeah.
I think we might have discovered why the fort is here.
Yeah.
We've unearthed loads of finds, but we're after the story of how Branadunum evolved, and we've got just one day left, with, I suspect, hangovers in the offing.
Wow.
It's our final day of digging at Branadunum Roman Fort in North Norfolk, and there's still all to play for. We think this trench over the ramparts could now be set to tell us more about just how the fort evolved. But we've only scratched the surface of what could be within the fort walls.
But
over there, that is our star trench. In it, we think we may have one of the most important buildings in the whole fort, and that is where we're going to be focusing all our resources today. This is over the fort's HQ, or Principia, where yesterday our Geophys survey revealed a lost underground chamber. Phil's team have been battling through layers of demolition left behind by the robbers, who over the centuries stole most of the Roman stone. But now they've made a breakthrough.
You want to have a look down here, Tony, because this is as big and this is as impressive as you will ever see, because we've actually got the wall here, and the beauty of it is that most of it appears not to have been robbed out, and it is an incredible structure. Look at these beautifully shaped stones. Look, we can see the wall exactly as it was put up by the Romans, what, 2,000 years ago. And look, and that sand.
What's so exciting about sand? It doesn't sound very interesting to me.
Because it is exciting. If we've got backfilled natural in there and not in here, there's this demolition rubble, that would imply that this level goes down much, much deeper. That's exactly as predicted on the geophysics.
And what do you think that we would need to find in order to establish whether or not that was the case?
Well, I mean, it's going to be fresh Roman finds, things that were dropped there in Roman times. So everything we found up to now, I think I'm right in saying, Phil, has been removed from its original place of loss.
Finds in situ could tell us what this underground chamber was used for. In the field to the north, we've put in a trench to test the theory that there was another much earlier fort here. But the ditches that we found aren't Roman. They're part of an earlier Iron Age, pre-Roman coastal settlement.
So we've got these two sort of parallel ditches here, and we're getting this stuff.
Wow, that's really interesting,
Yeah.
though. Even though they're really abraded, you can tell by the inclusions, the little bits of flint, that those are mid to late Iron Age. So they're the earliest bits of pot from the whole site.
Fantastic.
This pottery, which clearly dates the ditches to pre-Roman, is a great find. But the trench we put in to uncover a second building in the fort is proving more of a problem. We can't see why it doesn't line up, as one would expect, with the rest of the Roman fort, and we can't identify the building. But the results from a nearby trench do give us the answer. The mystery of the fort's development is about to unfold at the trench dug across the fort ramparts. Here, the team have uncovered more of its structure.
That actually is the earliest part of the fort. That is an earthen rampart.
Yeah, an earth bank, yeah.
Yeah, so we have the ditch coming through, and then we have this other earthen rampart, which probably would have gone all the way around this precinct.
The stone rampart is actually cut against the earth rampart, is that right?
Exactly. So what they've done is they've come along, they've decided they don't want to have an earthen rampart anymore. They want to build a big, posh wall. So they've actually cut into that earthen rampart and then constructed this massive wall that runs all around the perimeter.
My guess is that that was built in the 100s, possibly even a bit earlier. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the first fort with the earth rampart was on that slightly squiffy...
The squiffy alignment.
Alignment, yeah. And I think that goes with the earlier fort. So we've been looking for an earlier fort out there and in other places. It was under our noses all the time, and you have found it in that rampart. So I am very, very pleased and excited, Raksha.
We now understand the development of this site in the late 1st century AD. It seems that the fort's earthen ramparts were constructed first, along with what our experts believe was a mansio, the fort's guest house, and that this lined up, as one would expect, with the ramparts and the associated vicus. Then the cut stone wall was added to the ramparts, making them bigger. And for whatever reason, they were built on a slightly different alignment. We really have rewritten the history of this fantastic site. And at the Principia, the new discovery has redoubled efforts in the trench. They've dug down now into the lost chamber. And a digger notices one of those finds that could easily have been missed.
a deposit of armour. It's just a little tiny little.
I don't know if we want to leave it there too long in the sun. I mean, it would be, you know, we want to get it out. Because obviously it is quite a significant find.
While they painstakingly remove the delicate fragments of armour, John's Geophys team are pushing the capabilities of their underground radar kit. So far, 120 kilometres of sensors sweeping the site make this the biggest they've ever undertaken. But as a result, the system has crashed.
So basically, we've collected so much data that you've put the system on overload?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, really. We've filled the positional system up beyond its capacity.
They'd promised to deliver a survey across the entire 24 acres, but all that's now in the balance. Back at Phil's trench, the tiny pieces of Roman armour are out of the ground.
It's Roman scale armour. It's called Lorica squamata. If you look carefully, what we've got here are some tongue-shaped pieces of bronze riveted together, and if you look carefully there, you can actually see one of the little rivets still. And they'd be then attached to like a thick, stiffened leather or linen jerkin.
Ah, so that's not just the armour itself?
No, that's just the outermost layer. But it also allows a lot more flexibility and movement, and it's typical of the 3rd century onwards, particularly for cavalry regiments.
It's all right, that's what we got here then?
That's right, we know of at least 2 cavalry regiments, one from Aquitaine and one from Dalmatia.
It is amazing. I mean, not only are we beginning to get in this trench now a feel about the building itself, we've now got a sense of what the people who were in that building really look like.
Yeah, lovely find.
We've made an unprecedented number of finds here, over 2,500 pieces in all, which tell us that this was a bustling and busy place. The locals, who shared their lives and traded with the Romans here, were catapulted from the Iron Age into Britain's first consumer society. Back at the Principia, it's time to take stock of what the trenches revealed about our star building.
What we've got are the foundations of the Principia building itself. And when I mean the foundations, these really are the foundations. You can see it down there. They are massive. They're about 1 metre across. If you look at that end section, do you see that grey, that whitish stuff?
Yeah.
That's the floor level of the underground room. So the foundations themselves go below that.
But I mean, that looks like proper dressed stone. You're not on the sort of rubble layer at the bottom. That is proper wall.
That is all below ground level. If they put that amount of care and attention into the foundations, just think how big that would have gone up there. It would have been absolutely colossal.
The Principia would have impressed all those who saw it. And around its central courtyard, there would have been dozens of offices from where Branadunum's officials and administrators worked. At the 59th minute, the Geophys team have completed their epic task of surveying the whole site. Even their troublesome radar survey has come up trumps. Up until now, we've only been able to identify 2 buildings within the fort's walls.
OK, so this is basically a 40-metre wide transect right across the interior of the fort. So it's going to go through the time slices and see if you can spot anything.
Good.
Just a bit.
These images are an archaeologist's dream come true.
I mean, if you look carefully, somewhere here you can see actually a couple of lines of colonnades.
Oh, look, stop. I mean, that is a massive stone structure.
And are those buttresses up against that wall?
Yes, definitely.
I don't think there's any doubt. That's a storeroom or granary.
It could have been a storage depot for masses of grain grown in the hinterland that was being shipped out to supply larger Roman centres of population.
So what about the oval to the right, within that rectangle?
Well, what's crossing my mind is the fact that we know this is a cavalry fort. And I'm just wondering whether this is a gyrus.
Really?
You know, it's a small arena-like space that you use for breaking in and training new mounts.
This confirms that the cavalry regiments were right at the heart of Branadunum. And there's only one other Roman fort in Britain known to have a gyrus within its walls. This fort was jam-packed with buildings previously unknown to archaeologists. Our trenches have revealed two quite distinct phases of building and ramparts once clad in upmarket stone. None of us could have imagined we would achieve so much in 3 days. We leave Branadunum in the knowledge that it was a grand design, a thriving boom town and an important centre for the region. Given that we've had such a triumph over in that field, you might wonder why we're finishing here in front of this trench, which is probably the least glitzy of them all. Well, the answer is because this trench has transformed people's thinking about this site. Up till now, it was assumed that in this field there was a smaller, earlier Roman fort. We now know that isn't true. What we've got here is an Iron Age site, the people who lived here before the Romans, the people who one day looked up and saw sailing across the sea towards them the Roman ships, and from then on their lives were never the same again. This is Ermine Street, the road built by the invading Roman forces as they swept north in the 1st century AD. The conquering legionaries established a base here at Ancaster in Lincolnshire shortly after the invasion, and there was a continued Roman presence here for the next 4 centuries. There's evidence of Roman life everywhere around here. Just round the corner there's a cemetery where they've discovered over 250 Roman burials, including 11 stone sarcophagi. And these finds, all discovered by local people, coins, brooches, this lovely statue of the goddess Minerva, are evidence of what an affluent town it was. But then something weird happened at the end of the 3rd century. This established town suddenly decided it needed to build a big defensive wall around its centre. Why? Time Team have got just 3 days to find out. It's a wet, and I mean very wet, start to day one. Geophysics and our diggers are battling gale-force winds and torrential rain as we set about uncovering the history of Roman Ancaster. And the man we have to thank for this rather bracing dig is our Roman expert, Guy de la Bedouillère. Guy, you've brought us to the epicentre of the worst weather in Britain today.
Nonsense. This is warm for Lincolnshire.
What is it about this place that is so exciting to you?
Well, we moved here about a year ago, and my younger son, went to the primary school, and I couldn't believe it when the head teacher started showing me all the Roman finds that have come up from all around here. But the strange thing is, Ancaster is not really very well recorded, so we know very little about what sort of place this really was.
Previous excavations do tell us a wall and ditches went up around Roman Ancaster in approximately 280 AD. Why those's another matter, and the theories range from the purely defensive to a status symbol built by an increasingly affluent population. But just about everything inside this walled area is now either built on or scheduled. Are we going to be stymied by the fact that we can't dig the walls?
Now, the scheduled area is the sort of walled area in the middle, but it's quite clear it goes either side of that at least, and so there's lots to do.
We're just outside the wall here, as Mick said, and it's absolutely stuffed with Roman finds. I mean, literally, you can just stand look at the ground and pick bits,
It's all over
bits
the
up,
place.
just like this, you know? It's literally as easy as that. And what's shown up so far is that there seems to be a cluster of very dense artefacts, and then a bit of a gap, and then another cluster, and then a bit of a gap. So what is going on here outside the town?
So we've decided to concentrate on 2 sites outside the walled town. Carenza will be in charge of this wheat field to the east, which our rain-sodden diggers have started to fieldwalk. Meanwhile, we're off to the other side of town, where Phil is already digging just outside the churchyard. Previous excavations have established a large Roman cemetery here, while our early geophys results indicate a lot of activity.
Yeah, there's your end, look.
When the church extended the churchyard some years ago to put more burials in, they actually came across more burials, Roman burials. Anyway, this Roman cemetery had, you turn left here. Yeah. It's a bit slippy on this mud as well. A bit. This cemetery had stone sarcophagi in it.
So what does that indicate about period?
Well, that really means that it should be late Roman. They should be Christian by then, because earlier on they have a lot of cremation, of course. But the other thing is that field also has a lot of domestic activity in it.
What do you mean?
Well, settlements, houses, turn left here. Yeah. So there's a dating problem, of course, you know, which comes first. Turn right here where these chaps are. We've got a big mat here across the entrance. So, can we see anything of the cemetery? Can we see anything of the civil settlement? And what's the relationship of date to those?
Philip!
Anthony!
What you got for us, mate?
Well, we've got an incredibly impressive hole, I think, for what a morning's work.
Fantastic.
Only drawback is there isn't anything in it.
Oh.
Very little.
What, no evidence of cemetery, settlement or anything?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh.
You would have expected in a trench, what, 5 metres long and 3 metres wide, 15 square metres. If we were in the middle of a densely packed Roman cemetery, you'd get at least one burial.
But you've got no burials, burial cuts?
We got no burials, and we appear to have no other earlier features either.
This empty trench is rather mystifying, because geophys results for this area show a mass of anomalies. But Phil thinks he's found the cause, a hard layer of natural iron. That sounds pretty metallic.
Iron pan.
Is that what's giving the geophysics signals then?
Well, I mean, I've already had a word with John Gator about this. I mean, I think it's important, very important, that he comes over and has a look at this.
So, is this just natural iron that's just lying in the earth?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the problem is it the bottom of the sequence? Presumably you're going to cut through it, aren't you?
Got to, absolutely got to.
While Phil goes through the iron pan to see if there's archaeology underneath it, I've got a chance to visit the local primary school, which has become an unofficial museum of Ancaster's Roman past.
Over the years, members of the public, children have brought them into school. We house them here for the children's heritage and for the community to come and view the finds.
And one child's father got particularly passionate about it.
Afraid so, yes.
It's very fortunate the guy came along with William. Yeah.
What do you think of all this stuff?
Well, it's really fascinating because although we've got fairly standard Roman material right the way through the period, we've got 1st century brooches, 2nd century pottery and 3rd and 4th century pottery, we've also got these carvings of gods. There's a hunter god there, and this is the Roman goddess Minerva.
Do we know much about the Roman gods who are around here?
Well, the only one we've actually got a name for is Vidius. Now, he turns up on an inscription which was found a number of years ago underneath the church and records an arch that was dedicated to him.
What does Vidius mean?
Well, a little bit difficult to know, but the beginning bit probably means mighty or great. The end bit, Dios, not really sure.
Is it just Dios, God?
That's a possibility. So it might mean something like mighty God, high and mighty God, great God.
Guy believes Carenza's field could be a prime candidate for a temple or some other sacred site. And the finds trays are already overflowing with evidence of Roman activity, although Carenza hasn't even dug a trench yet. What we need now are some geophys results.
Ditches in black, magnetic survey, so cut into the ground, big pits as well.
But what about buildings?
Well, there may be a building as well in here.
Well, I think it's really exciting because what I've postulated about this whole area, because we've got this religious sculptures, that we may have a temple somewhere. Now look, you've got an enclosure and we've got a building that looks fairly isolated in the middle of the enclosure. That is exactly the sort of way a Romano-Celtic, Romano-British temple might have been set up.
OK, but we need to do a bit more.
I think the sensible thing for the minute then is for us to get started with a trench across the ditch.
OK.
If you can carry on and get any more detail on the building,
about the building,
that
yeah.
would help, because I think this, if it is a temple, we really need to get in at the building, don't
That's
we?
very important, yeah.
So Carenza's first trench goes in across the ditch of this potential religious site. Down in Phil's cemetery field, we've got a breakthrough. He's now managed to get under the iron pan.
The black sort of seems to be just underneath the iron pan, yeah.
It's beautiful sound, isn't it, eh?
Building the bigger picture of Roman Ancaster is now well underway, and Stuart's getting to grips with the effect the 3rd century wall had on this already well-established town.
So you're saying the town expanded well out, or was well outside these earthworks that
Pretty good indications that the town extended outside these earthworks in all directions.
So it's quite critical in the way we understand this. I mean, I'm going to have to fight really hard, I suspect, so I'd like to have some geophysics in this area.
Well, it would certainly be very valuable, particularly inside the earthworks.
It's going to be hard work to get them out of there.
Did you manage to get under the iron pan, Phil?
We got some fascinating results, Tony. We've got this one, sort of an irregular area of burning there, and quite a circular area of burning there. But in the corner, we've got this area across here, sort of brownish stuff with a reddish edge, and then in here, this sort of regular square-ended thing like that. And in here, we had a massive pottery with big, hefty rims, and that's all underneath this panning. But to be quite honest, I haven't got the foggiest idea what it is.
What do we think that burning might be?
Well, the burning is really intense, and this so-called iron pan, it's really magnetic. There's lots of charcoal in it. So whether we've got metalworking going on in this area and we've got bits of slag around, or whether we've got, I suppose, pyres from burning bodies.
Well, you have to get up to about 600 degrees C to burn a body, and that's pretty hot.
So it could either be something to do with the settlement then, or something to do with the cemetery.
Because presumably, well, we know that there is cremation burials being found in gardens around here. So if you've got an earlier cemetery, it's got to be a cremation cemetery. And they had to burn the bodies somewhere, so why not on the edge of the burial places?
With the possibility of this being the site of a funeral pyre, Margaret's keen to find out as much as possible about the Roman cemetery in this field. She and Mick want to dig a trench to the north of the modern graveyard where there may be burials. It's a proposal that doesn't exactly appeal to an overstretched John.
I can see where this is leading.
Yeah.
What do you mean, yeah?
Well, I think you need to have a look at it for us, please.
What else have you got to do?
Well, we're halfway through the new field. Stuart's talking about us going into the scheduled area as well.
Do we need to geophys before we dig on the northern side?
Oh, well, yes, I think you do.
So he really wants to do it, actually.
Change the tune.
But it's a question of which we do. I mean, we ought to go in and survey that if you're going to dig in there.
What's the priority?
Well, I think that's a priority because there's some recording here, isn't there, Phil?
Yeah, and there's a bit more excavation too. I mean, there's still work to be done in here.
So Phil will continue to unravel the mysterious burning in this trench, while Geophysics return to the cemetery field to find a new target. But we're almost at the end of day one. A frustrating day for Phil, but a fantastic one for Carenza and her team in the wheat field, where the archaeology isn't just abundant, but surprising. Carenza, how's it been going?
Well, but we've had masses of human bone coming out. We're getting trays of it here. You can see the jaw there, very distinctively human. It's utterly bizarre though, because we've got this stony feature coming along here, which might be a ditch filled with rubble or it might be a wall. We've got this feature coming along here and you can see there's bones still in the trench. Human bone, all jumbled up, not neatly laid out skeletons, and it's got animal bone mixed in with it as well.
Have you finished doing the geophys of this area?
Well, this is as far as we got before you stopped us. We've got this
Wow.
really amazing enclosure.
Now
Where
our
are
trench
we?
is just here, isn't it?
This is turning into a really strange site. In the cemetery we haven't found any bones. Where we thought there'd be habitation we've found hundreds of bones. And what about this thing here? Whatever could it be? Might it even be the temple, which we hope might be here? Beginning of day 2 in our search for Roman Ancaster, and at last it's stopped raining and the sun's come out, which is a big relief to everyone. Over there, beyond the church, Caerenza's still grappling with this mystery of a confusion of animal and human bones apparently on top of a Roman building. And here, in the cemetery field, Phil's just walked away from the trench that he was digging all day yesterday beyond that big hedge in order to open another one. Phil, what's going on?
Well, actually, Tony, we're going to open 2 trenches.
Look, we've got the geophysics now, and you can see this fantastic ditch coming through here. But the thing is, we don't know whether it's the northern boundary of the cemetery or whether it's an earlier fort ditch.
An earlier Roman fort?
Roman fort, yes.
So why are we digging 2 trenches?
To actually undertake one big one might be a bit more than we can bite off. We'll put one in on that anomaly there, that dark area there, and also one across the ditch.
Yeah.
So we've laid in those 2 trenches. All we've got to do now is dig them.
What do you mean you've laid in them?
Well, we've located them. We've plotted them on the ground.
You
lay in a trench. That's what you do.
Well, I was only asking. Hopefully, these 2 trenches will give us more than just the edge of the Roman cemetery. We're looking for as much dating evidence as possible to help us unravel the 400-year history of Roman Ancaster.
Just make sure you got it flung back far enough.
We're particularly keen to discover more about what happened to the town when a wall was built around it in the late 3rd century. And from the air, Stuart may have found a clue.
I mean, one thing looking at it from here, Mick, is once you get over this ridge to the east, just how close you are to the Fenland.
Yes, it's very flat, isn't it?
And where the original Roman coastline was. So
Yeah.
you know, this actually is such a key position in the Roman hub of things that it's not surprising a town grew up here anyway, is it?
Yeah.
The walled town is actually quite small, isn't it? Compared to what we're looking at, which is a town which spread over onto that hill, huge cemetery areas out here.
But you see, I think the reason for that is that if you've got cemetery and occupation, and looking from here, look, it's going to go from where the church is, across the green field, out into the triangular field where we're digging, and then at some stage you have to provide some defences, then my guess would be that something that is actually across the road that actually cuts off a piece of the road, which is that walled area does, is ideal if your job is to control the routes rather than to defend the whole occupied area, which you probably couldn't do. It's
That's
probably
right.
too big.
It's almost like a Roman toll booth in a way, isn't
Yeah.
it? You know, you've got to go through it, haven't you?
Yeah.
So we may be getting an idea of why the town wall was built, but other aspects of this site continue to baffle. We thought we might have a temple in Caerenza's field, but at the minute all we have are a series of mysterious burials.
What we've got in these trays is all adult bone. You've got this femoral head from the thigh bone.
Is that really human?
Yeah, this is human, although it's broken, so it looks a bit odd. And this is the top of a humerus, so the upper arm. And they're huge. I mean,
That's why I wondered they're sort of cow-sized almost, aren't they?
well, you know, he or she was a very, very large person. Whereas this person here, this is from the lower arm, this is the radius in fact, comes from somebody who's fairly short, you know, or has at least got very short arms. So it's extremely unlikely that these come from the same person. This is a little bit of mandible from a male. Interestingly though, for the Roman period, if that's what this is from, is that there is no disease on these teeth. They're quite worn, which suggests they're from an older person, but classically Roman teeth are actually quite bad. They could have quite refined diets with lots of sugars and carcinogenic foodstuffs, and you get lots and lots of decayed
So
teeth.
you're saying you don't think that's a Roman?
Well, it's a possibility that it may not be from a Roman person.
So this Roman site could have been later reused as a cemetery. Yet more proof of how Caerenza's field's jam-packed with archaeology. But I don't think the same can be said of Phil's so-called cemetery field, despite them literally leaving no stone unturned.
A local chap was telling Kerry about it yesterday, so we said, well, you know, we've got to go and have a look. And it is the sort of thing you'd cover a sarcophagus with, isn't it? Well, it might be. you know, it's what I'd call a good piece of stone, even if I haven't got a use for it.
Is that what you'd call it?
Yeah.
I bet your back garden's full of those, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is actually.
What do you reckon, Terry?
It's not looking good, to be honest.
Ooh.
You're just teasing
Hey?
with your ooh.
I'm trying to build the tension.
In spite of Phil's almost desperate optimism, it does look like this is just a regular piece of stone. And as his second trench of the day goes in, there are rumblings of discontent over the amount of manpower being used in the cemetery. Because we could really use them to open up even more of Carenza's field, where there seems to be no end to the archaeology.
Can't see anything that's not human here. And again, Carenza, they're big people. You know, they're uncharacteristically Roman to see so many big... I'm not saying you never get a tall Roman, but these are all tall, big people.
Guy, what do you reckon's going on here?
Well, we've ended up with these damaged, disrupted bodies. That means there must have been an earlier burial.
When they weren't damaged, they were laid out properly.
Exactly. The question is, has the enclosure and all the other occupation debris we've got here, does that represent a cemetery area, or have we got a whole earlier occupation level before the cemetery? So that's the problem.
So I guess what we need to do is find out exactly what's going on here in this trench, why these burials are in there, and then look at the inner enclosure around that building as well. Do you think, Jeremy?
Precisely. At the moment, certainly in this trench, all we really understand is the final phase of activity. Continued excavation here and the new trench will really help us to understand what this enclosure was originally used for.
So we're putting a second trench across the centre of the enclosure.
So, 10-metre trench, bucket width?
I think, yes. Let's
Have a
just start here, take it back 10 metres, should cover, go right across that area and just see what we hit.
Yeah.
With such a demand on our resources, this is probably our last chance to investigate Guy's theory that we may have a temple in Carenza's field, a theory partly based on the large number of religious finds discovered around Ancaster. The most striking was found in the grounds of Ancaster's church, which many believe sits on the site of a much earlier Roman temple. This unique inscription dedicates an arch to a mysterious god called Vidius. Why would he like an arch?
Well, something Victor's prepared is this lovely drawing of what might have been here on this site underneath the church. It's quite common for Christian establishments to be built later over a place that has a local tradition of religious worship. Here we've got temple, but an entranceway through an arch. Now, an arch in Roman religion, that period, it's a sacred passageway from one zone to another.
But we think we may have a temple further down the slope, don't we? Does that mean that there would have been lots of different religious places in the town?
It's certainly possible there'll be more than one religious place within the town, but it's also not uncommon to find religious centres immediately outside, particularly if they're along main roads.
But a Roman temple is also a kind of an entertainment thing. It's also a way of giving thanks for your journey. There may also be a hostelry, an inn association with it. So there's a lot of value to a Roman in having this kind of thing in a town, and a lot of passing trade that this kind of place can benefit from.
So this might actually have been the thing that was driving the town in its early years.
Exactly.
Good Lord. It's a big old piece of pot and it's well decorated, isn't it?
Yes, very nice.
Over in the cemetery, it looks like Phil and his team have at last come up with something.
Maggie, what on earth is that?
Well, I mean, this is shell-tempered ware, which is classic for the Iron Age in this area, and it's handmade, but it's got this very regular scoring, but very short scoring, and this is actually the shoulder. It's going to be a large storage job. Now the difficulty is obviously going to be the dating. It could be late Iron Age, but there's no perceptible change between the late Iron Age and the early Roman.
So we could be looking at a big area of settlement which extends into our trench on the south side of the modern cemetery.
Yeah, yeah.
And Phil's original trench has also now yielded evidence of early occupation.
All afternoon, we think we've got a kiln. We've got a concentrated area of burning up there, which is tapering off away behind me. And we think these may be the bases of pots.
What, these little round things?
Yeah, left from the last firing.
Blimey. Does this actually help with what you had on the geophysics?
That's brilliant.
Ah,
I mean,
right.
the whole point is iron pan is not magnetic.
No.
Yet the iron pan we had...
That big block of stuff we were looking at yesterday.
it was really strong.
Yeah.
And I said there had to be some sort of fire going on here, sort of industrial process or a pyre. And to get a kiln, I mean, brilliant. It explains all the anomalies.
It now looks certain there was a settlement here in this part of Ancaster before it became a Roman cemetery. Very useful for our history of the town.
I mean, it may not, you know, it may not push the story along, like, you know, but it's still good archaeology.
Yeah.
But can we really justify keeping Phil and his team down here when we need more diggers up in Caerleon's field? Mick, I don't understand why we're so obsessed with this cemetery field. We don't appear to have found any buildings, we don't appear to have found any burials, whereas on the other side, it's jam-packed with stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting really excited about it. So why are we bothering to continue to look for the edge of the cemetery?
Well, I don't think we are. I think from what I've seen of these trenches now, we're at the position where we can answer a lot of that and say, you know, there is archaeology here, but there's not a huge amount of it.
Yeah, and what do you mean there's not much archaeology here? There's stacks of archaeology here.
Yeah, but in terms of the problem we've set ourselves, there's far more on the other side that we probably ought to be examining.
What were the... You tell me what the purpose of these trenches was?
To see whether there was occupation and the history of the town on this side of the enclosure.
Okay, we've answered that. We've got a lot of evidence of occupation in over here. What else was the other object of it?
To find the edge of the cemetery.
Right. Now, I know we haven't found one yet, but where I'm digging at the moment, you've got a straight edge along there, turning round there and coming back there. It's aligned east-west. It looks like it's filled up with very loose, backfilled natural. Now, I don't know. That is very, very similar to the sort of fill you'd get in a grave.
Yeah.
It was a close scrape, but Phil buys some more time in the cemetery field. Up in Caerleon's field, the new trench is coming along nicely.
Actually, it's quite a sudden line here.
While the decidedly non-Roman bodies discovered this morning are about to be lifted.
Just leave it. Ooh! Oh dear. It's very fragile.
Can you just hold it on that side?
Yeah.
Might be able to.
You want to hold it all together?
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Oh.
I think it's almost certainly a female because this is smooth and rounded and these are sort of medium in size and there's no really pronounced brow ridges or anything, so I think this is a woman. Wow. She's in very, very good condition, isn't she?
Yeah.
Well, no argument about that, is there?
Doesn't look like it, does it? Looks like a big coffin lid to me, that does.
So how will you excavate that once you've cleared all the loose and the rubble and stuff away from the top?
As always, define it. I mean, you know, we got the first part, we literally follow it back at that level.
I suppose what I'm really saying is, I want to know what's under that slab. How long will it be?
That's a much bigger job, isn't it? Because,
It's don't get too hasty. If this job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I mean, there's a lot of work involved here. Plus, you've got to remember, it is still a grave, and we got to show a certain level of respect for it. So it's not just a matter of ripping it out and lifting the lid off.
As Phil sets about the sarcophagus with renewed vigour, Caerleon's discovered evidence of a building inside the enclosure.
So maybe we have got a wall foundation that's actually coming this way.
Straight through.
This, along with the evidence in Caerleon's first trench and the field walking results, suggest there was a substantial suburb to the east of Ermine Street. But Stuart's now convinced this suburb dramatically changed when the centre of Ancaster was surrounded by the wall and two massive ditches in the late 3rd century.
But when you come down here, this is much more like the ditch was during the Roman period.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the size of that rampart there. I mean, it's been cut to a huge depth. Comes down, you've got this wide ditch that we're standing in here. Then in the middle, you've got this rampart.
Yeah.
Then beyond it, another ditch the same width as this. then the rampart of the walled town, then on top of that you've got the wall itself. So this is a huge, huge construction.
That's taken an awful lot of town out if you came across here, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a massive construction.
It is.
Cool.
Tomorrow we'll dig a trench next to these defences in the hope they'll provide the final clues as to what happened here almost 2 millennia ago. But as day 2 draws to a close, Phil's now certain he's got an intact stone coffin. Although the news isn't all good.
Well, we've had the metal detector guy go over it, and he says there's a suspicion of metal sounding underneath it.
Well, that isn't good news, because that means there might be a lead coffin then, so...
What's that mean?
Well, it means there are all sorts of health and safety implications that we've got to think about.
Like what?
Well, for a start, you know, lead, it will oxidise, and the minute the stone is taken off, if the lead is oxidising, there'll be lead oxide in the air,
right,
which you can't inhale because it's poisonous. But it also means that we'll probably get what we call body liquor, which is from the decomposing tissues. And associated with that, you have to assume that the risk of biological hazards, which means we have to suit up and wear masks that are actually fairly sophisticated in terms of filtering out biological particles.
We got all that stuff,
We've got all of those, yeah. We came prepared.
I'm glad of that.
Have you ever taken the lid off of a sarcophagus before, Phil? Have you done it before?
No, I never have. It's kind of...
Do you find it an uncomfortable thought?
I feel differently to what I would with a normal skeleton. Even if you're in a grave, you kind of know that it's there, and you just go down onto it and there's a body there.
Yeah.
But knowing that there is this stone container with a body in it,
it's quite awesome, really, isn't it?
I can't put it into words.
A reflective end to day 2 in the cemetery field. Thankfully, the opportunity of a game of cricket with the locals gives us all a chance to unwind and review the progress of our 2 sites. So how far did you manage to get, Carenza?
Well, we've got most of the bones out of the first trench, and the second trench is starting to turn up structures like floors and walls, it looks like. And of course we had that fantastic geophysics with all those new enclosures, and what we really wanted to do was put a couple of trenches into those new enclosures to find out what date they are and what's going on inside them. Now, when I spoke to you earlier, it was all, yes, we're going to put all our energies into that field, we're pulling out a cemetery field, and I've seen nothing since. I mean, have we still got the manpower for that?
I think we have, because there's a number of trenches in that field coming to an end anyway, where Caerleon is, for example, so there'll be extra people.
Did you get as far as you hoped, Phil?
I think we got further than we'd hoped, actually. I mean, obviously the main effort's got to be tomorrow to actually find out what's in that sarcophagus, the stone-lined coffin, really.
So tomorrow we've got a heck of a lot of work to do to try and sort out the story of Roman Ancaster, but I can't help admitting that there's a bit of me that really wants to see what happens when Phil lifts the lid of that stone coffin. It's a sunny start to day 3 in Ancaster, and the latest geophys results from Carenza's field have revealed at least 5 more enclosures, suggesting our Roman suburb could be much bigger than we expected.
We've got to put a trench in somewhere and find out whether they're just farm areas or whether we've got perhaps industry going on here.
These definitely look industrial-like.
Right.
Perhaps if we could find a trench that would go across one of the ditches and into the interior.
Yeah.
So another trench goes in to judge the extent of occupation. While in Phil's cemetery field, which we were within minutes of shutting, we now have a stone coffin in one trench.
Yeah, let's go sort of middle for diddle-ish.
42.63.
And 2 further burials in the other trench, plus loads of vital dating evidence. We've a classic day of digging in prospect, until Mick drops a bombshell. I assumed, and I think everyone else assumed, that we were going to lift the lid of this sarcophagus first thing this morning, but now you're saying, well, I don't know.
Well, should we, and have we got the resources to do it? I mean, I think I need to be convinced about that.
Should we, Margaret?
Yes, I think we should. This is a different type of sarcophagus. It's not actually a sarcophagus, it's more of a kiss burial.
What do you mean it's not a sarcophagus, it's a kiss?
A sarcophagus is created out of one piece of stone. This is actually created out of slabs that form a sort of pseudo-sarcophagus. And so, as far as we know, there are none of those on the main cemetery site. Now, that makes this a very unusual type of burial.
How long is it going to take to deal with what's inside? Because that sounds like a big job to me.
It won't take very long to get the lid off because we've got the resources, and we've also got the resources to deal with what's inside, so I think we can do it today.
Do you want me to excavate that grave or don't you?
I think if Margaret's clear that there's good reasons for doing it and we've got the resources to do it, then we should go ahead, yeah. I mean, I just needed to be reassured about that.
You reassured now?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
If we do have to suit up for a potential biohazard, the whole excavation process will become very time-consuming. So Phil decides to take a quick peek under the lid to assess the danger.
Let's go in. Yep. Get your hands underneath there. Well done.
At the moment, no immediate sign of a lead coffin. So that, I'm sure, is a relief to all of us.
Got it? Well done.
With the stone coffin declared a lead-free zone, it's all now down to Phil.
Right. Can somebody get me some digging tools? And I guess leave me to it.
Giving Mick and me a chance at last to catch up with the suburban sprawl in Carenza's field. Carenza, sorry, I nearly knocked you into the trench.
Yeah, well, I was a bit worried for a moment.
How exuberant he was there.
Yeah. I'm lost. What's been happening here?
Right over the far side, we put a trench across one of these little square enclosures because we were thinking they might be part of the settlement. But it looks at the moment as if they're actually paddocks because we're getting very few finds at all. It doesn't look
agricultural rather than town.
Well, we're getting no occupation,
That's
very
very
little pottery, so it looks like they might be fields, which makes, again, this enclosure that we're now standing in the middle of look, again, as if it's rather out on its own. So we put this trench right in the middle of this enclosure to try and find out what's going on in the middle of it, and we've got some really interesting stuff out of this. We have got a wall.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Not very deep, but it's well built and it's straight. Behind it, all that stone, what looks like rubble, is actually a cobbled surface. All the stones are laid in at the same angle.
So we've got some sort of yard or something out there.
Something like that, I reckon, yeah. But that's all quite late, and a lot later than this end of the trench, because that wall is sitting on top of all this sandy, very humic sort of occupation debris in the trench here, and that's produced some fantastic finds. We've had masses of stuff out of it. You can see we've got trays of it. We've got a piece of Samian here, which has actually got a stamp on it.
Oh, crikey, that's good, isn't it?
So we should be able to get a good date on that. And we've got a lovely 1st century brooch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice find, isn't it?
But what's really interesting is it's very early.
Ah.
Finds like this brooch point to high status occupation here in the 1st and 2nd century. And then there's nothing for at least a couple of hundred years until this 4th century wall and floor, indicating a much later period of rebuilding. It now seems likely the 3rd century town wall had a lot to do with these two phases. Stuart certainly thinks so, backed up by John's massive survey of the field.
Filled in that area, Mick, there's the Roman town.
Yeah.
That's the wall and the ditch coming through there. But the thing of real interest, that looks like a road coming out.
This could be a key area, couldn't it, in identifying that sequence. Was that road here when the town defences were cut, or is it a road that's put in afterwards to support this suburb?
The key thing, I think, is that if this road is chopped through, then that does actually give us that evidence that the construction of this fort disrupted the town.
So are you saying that this town wall would be a bit like the M25, that everything that was there before would suddenly be cut off?
Absolutely,
yeah, that's a potential. Or the Berlin Wall, you know, with streets coming up to it completely blank.
Yeah.
A trench across this possible road should give us the answer we need.
All we need is the metal surface and we can go home early.
But if the 3rd century wall and ditches did completely cut off this suburb, then it's highly unlikely the wall was just a decorative or status construction. There must have been a very good reason for such a drastic action. Is there any historic evidence which might explain why they put up this wall?
Well, the context seems to be that in the first part of the Roman period, we're on a boom roll. Towns grow and expand almost like wildfire. You know, there's little Iron Age settlements, and then a few decades later, there's sprawling towns. But in the latter part of the period, we start to hear about pirates raiding the coast, and the whole place seems to have become much more insecure.
But, Guy, we're miles away from the sea.
Well, not in Roman times. We're actually quite close to where the sea was, and the Romans in Britain have to throw up a whole series of forts all around the east coast and the south coast. Also, many of the Roman towns start to get walls, and it's possible that here at Ancaster we've got a place that's halfway between a town and a fort.
So are you saying that you think the specific reason these walls were erected was to protect the people inside from outside attacks?
That's right. Where we once had a much bigger town, I think people have pulled back to go within the walls. They've got protection there, a refuge. It may also house troops.
But presumably also it would have looked quite impressive.
That's one of the arguments, but I don't think, if you want to look really impressive, I think you'd throw up a bigger and flashier wall and you'd record the fact. What we often find with these town walls is that they're thrown up using any materials to hand. It looks a bit more panicky, particularly with this kind of place. It's much more businesslike, and it does enclose such a relatively small area. I think people had to put those up pretty fast.
Is it? Oh, look! I know what it is. It's the palate.
There are no teeth.
Look, that's right. There's the upper jaw.
Yeah.
There's the cheekbone. The eye, one eye is going to be in there, and that is the corner of the nose.
It is. I've never ever seen a skull from this angle before, looking up through
it's
somebody's
weird,
cheekbone.
isn't it?
Although most of the attention in the cemetery field is now focused on Phil's stone coffin, the other finds are giving us a fascinating insight into the effect the 3rd century wall had on the sprawling town of Ancaster.
We've got a range of material really, because we're running from the late Iron Age into the Roman period, because these cream sherds are really from flagons, and they're very thin walled, and I would have said 1st century.
But how far through the Roman period can we go with the pottery?
So far we can go to about the mid-3rd century, because this is a Nene Valley folded beaker, and the fabric is really going to be mid-3rd and onwards. But what we don't have is anything that's positively 4th century.
But that's the date of the graves, isn't it?
Yeah. So it would suggest that the main activity in terms of occupation or whatever was going on pre the graves had actually ceased within the 3rd century.
Well, I'm quite excited about the Iron Age stuff, because I just wonder if there was indeed an Iron Age shrine or an Iron Age settlement. That's what attracted the Romans here in the first place. And maybe we've got a small town extending out across here, but falling out of use entirely when the walls go up at the end of the Roman period, and then perhaps the buildings completely disappeared, and that's why a cemetery ends up in the area.
The evidence from the two sites seems to be painting the same picture. The massive defences built in the 3rd century dramatically altered the town suburbs.
Hi Kerry, how's it going? Any sign of that road?
Yeah, we've got it up here, but unfortunately it's been cut by walls. We've got a wall here, and I've got the road from here to here.
Oh yeah, worn away cobbles, as it were.
That's right, and then it's been cut again by another wall. They're built on top of the road. The road itself is too small to be a main road, so we need to get underneath the cobbles to see if we can find some dating evidence.
Margaret, you know that stone with the groove in it?
Yeah.
It's inscribed.
Good Lord.
Look.
Can you make any sense
Well,
of it?
no, just give me time. There's a letter, there's a vertical there, and it goes round there. It looks like maybe an R. That's beginning to look almost like a V.
It is, isn't it?
And that, I don't know whether that's a big O.
This is beginning to look very similar to the inscription Guy showed me yesterday, and if it is, Phil's got a major discovery on his hands.
Stone of Crows.
D-I-O-V-R-I.
Well, I didn't expect that.
Margaret, I hear something's happened that makes it worth my while getting up this morning.
It's so exciting.
Come round
wait till you come round this side.
Look, we've got this enormous slab of stone in here, look, and it's inscribed.
Oh, my goodness. It's to the god Vidius.
Who?
Yeah?
Who is he?
It's our god Vidius. We've already got an inscription. We've already looked at that. Tony and I have looked at that inscription.
Really?
Found 40 years ago. He's only known from one inscription in the whole country, from the churchyard in Ancaster. And here he is again. But, and this is the great thing for Time Team. The inscribed stone from the churchyard is not very well carved. That is top-grade Roman inscribed lettering. That's really classy, early 2nd century style. Do you see?
Fabulous.
Deo Viridio, to the god Vidius. So here he is again. He's the man.
God. Yeah, we thought it was good, but we didn't think it was that good, did we, eh?
It's top class. Top class.
Well, this is a turn-up for the books. But despite the intense interest in our Vidius grave, we haven't forgotten the other trench in this field. We've another burial, which is also Roman, cut into an Iron Age ditch, so we know the Roman cemetery continues north. This grave is also a form of kist, although much less refined. Instead of the slabs used on Phil's grave, smaller stones were placed on top, and these seem to have eventually crushed the body. We're also beginning to build a profile of the man buried with the Vidius inscription. He was a survivor, a town elder who probably lived into his late 70s, but who'd suffered during his life.
This guy is walking around with 2 broken legs.
Yeah, he'd had 2 broken legs, hopefully for his sake, not at the same time.
Good Lord.
You see, you've got a lot of foreshortening there, which would have
good
actually
Lord.
made quite a significant limp. Can you see?
Yeah.
Sort of lost about 1 centimetre on the right leg.
Up in Carenza's field, we're finishing off our story of our suburb. And the road trench dug this morning has now given us our final piece of dating evidence.
Maggie, we've had a piece of pottery turn up in the building rubble that is the foundations for the structures either side of the road here. Can you tell me what date it is?
Well, it's one of these storage jars. So really you're looking at 1st century running into the 2nd century. About 120-ish should be about it.
Right. What seems to be happening, I think, is that we've got, very soon after the Roman conquest, we've got settlements sprawling all along the road here, possibly from right over there, to our big enclosure, which might have a shrine or a temple in it or something. Next point at which we've got any idea of what's going on in this field at all is mid-late 3rd, because there's no later pottery at all here. So it's as if when the town defences are built, the settlements retreated behind there, left this area unoccupied, but the enclosure in the middle there is the focus activity at that date, so that's still in use. And by the later 4th century, it's being used for burial.
So it now seems the town wall killed off this suburb in its original form. But how does that help us work out why the wall was built? It's at times like this you turn to Stuart.
There's clearly a settlement of sorts in the late Iron Age around here, which the Romans, in effect, reoccupy and use. And we seem to have evidence from the excavation up on the trench by the rampart, Mick, of a possible road coming in down here as well.
A road there now, yeah.
So we have a picture of a kind of a spread out settlement, concentrated alongside the road, but by the time the walled town goes in, you get a very different perspective on it. You could switch over, Neil. The big earthwork ditches that were put around it, they basically just chop away. They dig out almost, a good half of the town disappear there. And
so the red stuff is actually the area that was encased by the wall.
That's right.
And then the stuff between the red and the yellow is what?
It's just gone. It's been dug away.
It's just ditch.
Yeah.
But it's ditches where there was town, isn't it?
Yeah. And the area that formerly was settled out down here...
It's disappeared.
That's gone. That's, in fact, just used as a cemetery area.
It's cut off, isn't it, from the rest of the town?
Entirely, yeah.
It's incredibly brutal.
Oh, it is. I mean, it shows just how determined they were to formalise this settlement. Now, they must have had very, very important reasons for doing this.
Sounds like a decision from the top, that does.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, kind of bureaucracy type of thing.
It looks like the wall around Ancaster was built on the orders of Roman central government to defend this strategic town, irrespective of the effects on the local community. And from his topographical research, Stuart thinks he may have found the origins of the god Vidius.
There's a very important spring site here. Now, I think in relation to dedications and gods and so on, we have a religious centre here in the Iron Age, and as we know from many other sites, such sites are used again and again in the Roman period. And look at the proximity of it to this big Roman settlement here. I think that, in essence, we've got a major religious shrine centre there.
So, Mick, it might not be fanciful to think of Vidius as a pre-Roman god associated with that spring who just kind of lasted.
That's right. I mean, often the Romans take over Celtic gods and incorporate them into their own pantheon.
We've done much more than find out why Ancaster's wall was built. We've discovered the grave of an elderly man who as a boy may well have witnessed its construction. And this fantastic time team dig has culminated in this rare inscription to the god Vidius, the only one ever discovered inside a grave.
I mean, every so often we find something on Time Team which you know is going to go straight into the textbooks, and this is one of those occasions.
And what way is the orientation of this kist?
It's east-west, head to the west.
So does that mean he's Christian then?
Well, it's very interesting. It seems to me we have two possibilities here. Either this chap is not sure whether he's Christian or pagan and he's hedging his bets, or the one I like better is that he's really a pagan, but he's buried in a Christian way, but his friends know he's a pagan, so they put this stone in right next to his head with his god on it.
But isn't there a third possibility, which is that it's just a coincidence that he's using recycled material that just happens to be the god's name?
I think it's too obvious that the inscription is still there. I think they would have turned it round and hidden it if he was really a Christian and they were just reusing the stone.
Actually, Mick, as I'm clearing away the bones here, there's actually traces of a lower layer of lettering. Got it?
Yep, we've got it. There we are.
Can you make anything at all from that?
I've got all the information I really need here because as well as the top line and the S and the A, I can see the top of the letter N and then the top of the letter C and the little N there that probably is a T. The word's going to be Sancto. It's to the god Vidius, the Holy One.
Caerleon, just outside Newport, South Wales. 2,000 years ago, this place was the fortress home of a mighty Roman legion. And just recently, a team of archaeologists working here have come up with some stunning discoveries. Their finds include some dazzling jewellery and fine carved objects. But even more exciting than that, they've identified dozens of new Roman structures. These buildings appear to be bigger and more extensive than anyone could have imagined. So when were they built and why? And was this place more significant than people previously thought? Only by digging can we hope to understand what these new buildings might be and why they were put here.
There it is. That is the information we want.
I've never excavated one of these before in my archaeological career.
So Time Team's heading to Caerleon for 3 days to lend some mind and muscle power. We'll be helping out in any way we can. Together, can we crack the mystery of one of the great sites of Roman Britain? Lying just outside Newport, South Wales, on the edge of the River Usk, is Caerleon's legionary fortress. It's one of Britain's greatest Roman sites. The fortress has been known about for over a century. And since the 1920s, archaeologists have uncovered its bathhouse, amphitheater, and even a barracks. So with all these large buildings already excavated, what's left to do? Well, on the land outside the main fortress, a Cardiff University archaeology team have made an incredible discovery. This area, to the south of the main site, was always thought to be nothing more than empty fields. But thanks to some remarkable geophys, site director Peter Guest now thinks he's identified a spectacular complex of Roman buildings. You've saved us a lot of time, haven't you? You've already done a load of geophys. Pete, what's this intriguing large complex that we've started talking about?
It's just southwest of the fortress. It lies in the area between the amphitheater and the River Usk, and it comprises this series of buildings here, which you can see a little bit better on geophysical results that we have here. Where we are now is in the middle of this very, very large complex here, a square courtyard building with large ranges on 3 sides and on the 4th possibly fronted by the quayside.
Roman archaeologists, by and large, you look at the shape of something and go, oh, I know what that is because the Romans built 19 of those somewhere else. What's the problem here?
The problem is the scale and its location. It's so big. It's one of the largest buildings known from Roman Britain, and the courtyard itself is over 100 metres either way. and the fact that it sits outside the corner of a legionary fortress. It's not what we expect from looking at other fortresses across the UK.
A gigantic courtyard like this could have been a temple complex, a large monument, or some kind of giant military parade ground. We'll only know for sure once we've put some holes in the earth.
We want you to dig in the centre of this, on top of what is a very interesting and possibly significant little rectangular building.
So, Tim, what in more detail do you actually see on the geophysics that we're actually trying to excavate?
Well, your trench is positioned over the corner of a little rectangular structure of some sort, more or less on the axis of the courtyard. But one of the intriguing things is that the geophysical anomaly which surrounds that is different from the rest of the structure that mark the line of stone walls.
Couldn't different be later? Couldn't we be looking at a Victorian privy or something?
Or a medieval cowshed. It could be many things. We'll only know once we put a spade in the ground whether we are looking at a Victorian privy or a Roman building of some importance.
We just need a digger, don't we?
Kevin!
So Phil's trench could allow us to identify the mystery building in the heart of this giant courtyard. And it may even offer us the key to understanding the entire area.
Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful. That's coming up well. Lovely. Lovely. I could do with some turf like this for me lawn.
One thing that's crucial to understanding Caerleon is the Usk River. In Roman times, rivers were vital thoroughfares for transport and supplies. So Alex Langlands is taking a closer look.
Wow. Peter, this is actually quite some river, isn't it?
It is. This is crucially important to the siting of the legionary fortress here. We're on the lower banks of the River Usk,
right,
and this is the lowest crossing point of the river.
So what effectively you're saying is that everything downriver from here is just too difficult to cross.
Too wide, too difficult. This is a very tidal river. It has a high tidal reach,
right,
which means that in terms of being able to sail up and down, it can be quite tricky at low tide as it is now. At high tide in the afternoon, the river then rises to the top of the mud flats you can see behind us and almost the bottom of the bushes over there on the right-hand side.
But at the same time, I guess that tidal reach could have been used to bring materials into this location.
Exactly. It's a very strategic place and it's a very good river for allowing access into the hilly interior part of Wales, so that the Legion here would have been able to supply the auxiliary forts at Usk and at Abergavenny and at Brecon too. And then in the opposite direction, the Legion could have been supplied from the rest of Roman Britain through the Severn Estuary. Right. But it is also about control. The legionary fortress sits on a major crossing point of north-south and east-west access routes, and it's about controlling people's movements and also communication, but also about being able to bring in large quantities of men and materials in order to push the Roman conquest of Wales further and further west.
Caerleon was clearly a very important centre in Roman Britain. But getting to grips with the newly emerging picture of this site is a daunting task. There are over 30 students and volunteers working here this summer in 8 active trenches.
Your trench is just here.
Time Team's Rakshar is joining supervisor Rob in a trench just to the east of Phil's trench, slightly to the south of the amphitheater. They think they may have picked up some Roman buildings on the geophys of this area.
So what are we actually targeting in this trench?
Well, the first part of the targeting was to establish whether these humps and bumps in the field were the waste tips from the 1920s excavation of the amphitheater. And secondly, once we can clear those out and prove what they are, then we can hopefully get down onto the Roman levels and find out what these buildings are underneath.
So we possibly have a Roman structure in here.
I certainly hope so.
I'm actually quite excited because you're still very much at the early phases. And I want to get in. You've got me for 3 days. Come on, then.
Right, that's it. We're going to move you up to the roof tile level up here.
Brilliant.
And see if we can find you corridors, walls, and maybe part of the monumental complex.
So here, in this well-advanced trench, Rakshar's already got some serious archaeology to get her teeth into. But even in Phil's trench, only opened earlier this morning, we're getting indications of walls and floor surfaces. Hopefully, by the end of the day, there'll be more to report. In the meantime, Mary Ann's keen to get to grips with the bigger picture of this site. By 76 AD, the Romans had conquered most of Britain, and fortresses were a key means of controlling their newly subjugated lands. In Britain, there were just 3 permanent legionary fortresses, one at Chester, one at York, and the one here at Caerleon.
Guy, we're talking about Caerleon being a legionary fortress. Do we know what the layout would have been?
If you imagine that this is our fortress here, you've got something like a very large playing card shape, and that represents the fortress walls, and you've got a gate in either side here and there. At one end, we've got loads of barrack blocks all the way up here, and at the other end, we've got loads of barrack blocks all the way along here. And in the centre here, we've got the headquarters building, other administrative and store buildings, and we've also got a huge military bathhouse. And outside, just over there, is the amphitheater, and beyond that is the site that we're digging today.
So this is a big, bustling city. It's kind of self-sufficient, is it?
It is self-sufficient. It's very self-sufficient because it has to be. This is the edge of the Roman Empire, and it is a sort of centrepiece, if you like, of Roman military culture. But it's not just the fortress. All round here are going to be the canabae, the hutments, the settlements, if you like, which are a sort of civilian settlement outside the fortress.
But at Caerleon, we seem to be finding far more than mere hutments outside the fortress walls. The evidence we're finding of a gigantic monumental complex is something nobody would have expected. So what's its function? It's all hands to the pump as we attempt to find out. Matt Williams is getting ready to muck in.
Hi, you Kaz?
I certainly am.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Nice to meet you, Matt.
Nice to meet you too.
Kaz is a Cardiff Uni supervisor, and she'll be doing her utmost to keep Matt in line. Their trench is at the edge of the courtyard complex, where the team think there's a series of additional buildings running along the side.
Right, I've been volunteered to join you in this trench. It looks pretty impressive. Can you tell me what's going on?
Trench 5's been located to find the orientation of the rear range of rooms that form that monumental courtyard within the complex. These walls would have formed the main walls of that range of rooms. So the walls we see coming out at right angles, this one here and this one to the right, would have then formed the room dividers, the internal walls.
Right, so you're standing in a little room there?
I am indeed.
OK, so where do you want me then?
Well, come on in here.
Oh, right.
Got your trowel?
I have indeed. Always got my trowel with me.
Fantastic. So the plan for today really is to take down this dark silty stuff in the hope that we can find a nice floor surface.
So a posh floor to go with the posh wall, really?
That would be fantastic. Opus igninum, something like that. Brilliant.
Lovely.
Opus igninum was a waterproof building material made of mortar mixed with fragments of crushed tiles or terracotta.
There's pot coming up already. Look, there's a piece there.
We have, out of here, another piece here.
Yeah.
Trays and trays full of pottery, animal bone, oyster shells, bits of plaster that have come off the wall. Fantastic finds coming up as well.
We could be looking at a fairly grand series of rooms running along the courtyard edge, but it's still too early to tell for sure. It was all going so well. But this is Wales in summer. What else did you expect? Still, just before the weather turned, Phil Harding made a rather intriguing find. I know this is the middle of August, but the rain has been tipping down. Everybody has left the trenches, except these two intrepid archaeologists who are very excited about something. What have you got, lads?
It's a really stunning object.
What is it, Peter?
A very unusual find. It's an intaglio.
What does that mean?
It's a gemstone that's been engraved. You can imagine how difficult it would have been to engrave such a small object. And it would have sat in the middle of a finger ring, something that a Roman legionary would have worn on one of his fingers. Have a look.
So it's got sort of figures in it, hasn't it?
It represents Roman imperialism, the eagle. We have the Roman Emperor Augustus in the person of the Capricorn, which is also the symbol of the Roman legion. And then, of course, the horn of plenty, the cornucopia, is associating bountifulness and good times with Roman rule.
I think this is the most beautiful, delicate little find we've had on Time Team for ages.
I know, and the beautiful thing is it came from our trench, and actually the archaeology in the trench ain't bad. We actually put this trench in to examine the square building that showed up on the geophysics.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you can actually see now the corner of the square building.
Not only have you got it, but that certainly doesn't look like a Victorian privy to me.
It's definitely not a Victorian privy. I think we're happy with that. It's unusual in that it's made of bits of Roman brick and tile, not the normal mortar and stone that we expect.
And I was talking to Tim earlier on about it, and he said being that it's made out of tiles like that explains why it showed up differently on the geophysics to a lot of the other walls.
And it's the only building, if that's right, it's the only building in this massive complex that's not built out of stone and mortar, the only one that's made out of Roman brick and tile instead.
So our mystery building is already looking very promising. Given the materials it's been built with, it could turn out to be something very significant indeed. It's been a fantastic first day helping out on this remarkable site, but we're ending the day in the campsite, where all the students and volunteers live for the duration of the dig. And those volunteers now include Matt and Raksha. We've got a surprise for you to help build the team a bit. We don't like the idea of the students sleeping in all these tents while you go off to some grand hotel. So in order to build a team, you two are sleeping in there tonight.
What? Camping?
Yeah, we are serious.
Actually,
Absolutely.
I've got a surprise for you.
Yeah.
I came here in my camper van today, so if it's all right, I think I'll just sleep in that.
So it's just going to be you, Raksha. Come on. Beginning of day 2 here at Caerleon in South Wales, where we're helping to investigate some mysterious and huge structures that surround one of the biggest Roman fortresses in Britain. These tents, by the way, aren't ours. They belong to the Cardiff University archaeological team who are doing most of the digging. Although, having said that, that tent is ours, as is this camper van, because last night, in the spirit of camaraderie, we got Raksha and Matt to stay here overnight. Here's a bacon sandwich for you.
Cheers, mate.
I hear that you might have had to have visited quite a few public houses in Caerleon last night in order to help you get to sleep.
Yeah, we did. It was there to numb the freezing cold and the pain.
Matt, you drew the long straw. There's your bacon
Thank you very much.
How was the night for you?
Pretty wild. We didn't have a great amount of sleep, but I feel fairly refreshed. I mean, get up in the morning, open the van door, and there's rain on your face straight away. So I'm ready for it, I think.
Do you think you're beginning to get a grip of the archaeology of this place?
Well, definitely, because we turned up yesterday, and as you know, usually we start and finish within 3 days. But I came in there yesterday, and the supervisor was there, and they've been digging for 3 weeks. Here's the rubble layer. We've gone through this. We've gone through that. So already, straight away, we're into the middle of the trench, and so much stuff has been going on already. And yeah, I think we're getting onto it very well.
Are you losing your voice?
I am indeed losing my voice.
How come?
Well, I think there might have been a bit of karaoke last night.
Oh, messy, messy. But while those two are still reaching for the Alka-Seltzer, one stalwart of British archaeology is already wide awake and itching to seize the day. Phil's trench is starting to look very ambitious. Let's hope he's not biting off more than he can chew in the 2 days we've got left here.
Let's just take a bit more of that side of that stone, and let's just see whether or not it goes down onto that sort of just clean greyish silk.
Phil's key aim for today will be to find the courtyard's surface. This could give us a vital clue as to the function of the mystery building and the wider area surrounding it. And while Phil cracks on, Mary Ann's dropping into the town's museum. She's going to take a look at some of the key finds to have emerged from the fortress over the years. Some of them look downright vicious.
OK, these are obvious to me. That's a spear point, and this is all weaponry, isn't it?
Yes, we obviously, being a legionary fortress, we've got a tremendous collection of military items, from spearheads, arrowheads, some of which have clearly seen action. You can see that that's hit a target.
Fantastic.
But we also have some of the ring mail of the centurion. The centurion wore that type of body armour. But then we've got some other weaponry. These caltrops here would be thrown on the ground, and whichever way they land, there's one spike that faces upwards.
So they just throw them on the ground, and when it went into either a horse or man's foot, that's it?
It brings them down, yes, and they're still used today to stop cars. The police use them as a stinger. Even to this day, they're very effective, tried and tested method.
And what about this?
It's the image of somebody with long, curly, flowing hair, leaning forward. He's naked. These are not Roman traits. He's clearly got his arms bound behind his back. And we believe he probably represented a captured native, possibly even a native Salure from the Salure tribe in this part of the world. And he might be leaning forward because he's about to receive a sword blow to the back of the head from a soldier or a cavalryman.
Gosh, you can't really get away from the fact that this is a military site.
It certainly is a military site, and I'm sure the soldiers would have liked this type of art.
Personally, I'm not sure quite how much time the battle-hardened legionaries would have had for art appreciation. This, after all, would have been a busy, bustling fortress, a constant hive of activity. And nowhere in the fortress would have been busier than the river bank, where goods and men were shipped in and out of Caerleon. So Alex is exploring a trench that looks like it's picked up the Roman quayside.
Scott, now things have dried up here in Trench 1, we've got a really good opportunity to check out this stratigraphy, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the rain's brought out the colours, you can see the various layers overlying each other, and what we seem to have here are various events of tipping and ground makeup for presumably ground reclamation.
So they're building up the ground surface in this part of the trench, but what are they doing in other parts of the trench?
Well, behind you we've got the tagular wall, and that effectively divides the wet side of the port to the dry side.
Yep. Yeah, and the crucial thing here is this clay then that's bonding the tagular wall together. That's creating a sort of waterproof boundary.
Absolutely.
So what they're trying to do is rework this area then to maintain access to the river, though.
Yeah, I mean, this could be an event where the river's silting up and it's moving away from their port wall.
Right.
And so they're putting hard standing down, they're reclaiming the land, they're moving closer to the river as it moves away from them.
Right. So we've almost certainly got a working quayside here.
I think so. I mean, if we look at the surface farther back over there, we've got a flagstone surface, and you can see that there's parts of the flags missing, and it's a good, hard working surface.
Yeah, but it's very smooth, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah, now that's carrying essentially up to our supposed monumental feature up in the site. Traffic from the quayside.
Yep.
So goods and people coming in here are going to have been using this floor to get up to that part of the site.
Yeah, it leads you in. It takes you from the port side all the way up into the courtyard to the complex up there.
So far, it's not an especially grand quayside. Could that mean that the courtyard lying beyond it is likewise less grand than we might have imagined? It's too early to tell, but there's no denying that some of Caerleon's main structures were built on a truly impressive scale.
Guy, this must be one of the most intact Roman structures in Caerleon.
If not the whole of Roman Britain, it's a fantastically well-preserved amphitheater. But what we've got are only the bottom parts of it. It had a huge wooden superstructure all the way around the top, so you can imagine it towering over you.
How many people would it have seated?
Well, at least 6,000, which is a pretty large number. And many of them would have been gathered up here, watching gladiators who would have started off their bouts by saluting the president of the games, who would have been up over here. And right out in the middle here, this is where most of the bouts would have taken place and where some of them would have died. And this is where their bodies would have been dragged away from.
Is that what was happening here? Gladiators fighting to the death? Christian martyrs being thrown to the lions?
I'm not too sure about the Christian martyrs, although that might have happened. But what we would have had is slave gladiators, people whose lives were basically doomed. They weren't going to live very long. They were going to have horrible, grisly deaths out here. But you haven't only got slave gladiators. You've also got amateur soldier gladiators, men who wanted to be like the great gladiators who would come out here and try and do their level best. But it's not the only thing that happened here, because what you should also imagine is the Roman army performing here. They would have put on celebrations of great battles from Roman history. But this is one of the most interesting features.
What's this?
This is the shrine to Nemesis. And Nemesis is fate. And fate is the goddess who determines, if you're fighting out here, whether you live or die that day.
Time Team's Matt Williams may not quite have the physique of a gladiator, but he's battling admirably against his hangover. Matt, how have you been getting on here? Am I all right going across here?
Yeah, just go across onto that wall.
Yeah. Yeah, how are you getting on?
Pretty well. I mean, we came in here yesterday and Cass said we've got a lovely painted plaster wall. Let's find the floor to go with it. So came in and we've not just got one floor, I've come up with two. We've got this lovely crushed tile floor there, and then there's an earlier white plaster floor underneath it there.
So what's happening in the rest of the trench?
Well, if you come on down this way, you're in the room there. This is where the main front wall of the corridor was. So if you step down here, now we're outside.
Yep.
And we're in another kind of covered walkway, a bit like the back. And here's the line which would have had the posts on and the floor, the roof coming over the top. So now we nip outside. It's beautiful kind of stone pavement there.
That is lovely,
it's
isn't it?
absolutely amazing.
Why is it flipped up at 90 degrees?
Well, I think that might be something to do with water management. There would have been a lot of water coming off the roof here, and there's a drain just behind you there.
Sure.
So that was basically to stop maybe the flooding of the main courtyard area.
It's a fine example of the careful civic planning for which the Romans are renowned. And rigorous Roman planning, alongside very rigorous discipline, is what turned the mighty legions into such an effective military force.
When we talk about the legions themselves, what do we know of the structure and the hierarchy?
We know that they were divided into 10 cohorts, which were subdivided into centuries. And each century was made up of 80 men. It used to be 100 men. It had become reduced to 80, but they had kept the title century. And a century, you won't be surprised to hear, was commanded by a centurion. These are the blokes who are going to be standing there saying, "You horrible little men, you," giving them a really, really tough time. Those are the chaps you'd be scared of.
Right.
Which brings us neatly, Alex, to your love of experimental archaeology.
Yes.
And how there might be no better way of understanding life as a Roman legionary than to live it for 24 hours.
Right, OK, this is sandals and skirts time, I guess.
All the way. Are you up for it?
Well, I don't think I've got any choice about this, have I? Nope.
No. We've got a lovely, delicious, horrible little man centurion waiting for you over there.
Right.
So, are you ready to do your duty for Rome, Alex? At my signal, unleash hell. Or half a dozen legionaries, anyway.
Now, Chris, I've been somewhat press-ganged into joining the Legion, and as I understand it, it's 25 years of my life I'm signing away here.
Indeed. In fact, if you're during that 25 years, you also are not allowed to make a legal marriage.
Right.
And if you were married when you enlisted, the actual process of joining the Legion would be an automatic form of divorce.
Right.
Before you joined the Legion, you would be expected to have purchased your kit. You're in the kit of a typical legionary of the 1st century AD, with this lorica segmentata type armour made of strips of metal, joined together inside on leather straps. So even though it feels heavy, it's quite flexible.
Right, so in terms of training, what's the sort of first steps?
Well, the first step with any soldiers really is to learn how to march. We know that the Roman soldier was trained to march some 20 miles in 5 hours.
OK, that's quite a pace, really, isn't it?
It is, yes, indeed.
OK, right, well, I'll put my my hat on. What's this called?
It's called a cassis.
Cassis, yeah?
And finally, you need a scutum, a very large shield. It's type of shield that, you know, riot police are still using today.
Yeah, well, it
big
is.
shield in that shape.
Great stuff.
And this throwing javelin called a pilum.
A pilum? Right, so I'm fully kitted up and ready for war.
Yes.
Well, you better introduce me to my new family.
You're right, will do. Where's the Vexarius? Come on! Get here. No, you two should be there, shouldn't you, you dozy blooming school teacher? Not you, him. Dextrosum would ite. Turn to your right. Hila portate. Proce. Ite. Alex, are you in step, boy? Are you in step? Get your head up.
Yep, sorry.
See you in 25 years then, Alex. Good luck. Hopefully Phil's trench won't take quite that long to start producing some results. Can I get in your trench, lads?
By all means,
Come on in.
Tony.
Now, this is the one that we put in yesterday because of the geophys which showed up this part of your monumental complex, and yet you seem to have got bored with that side of the trench and you've started working here.
Ah, but you've also got to remember that when we actually had that discussion, we also flagged up the fact that we needed to try and find the surface of that monumental complex. And what we've been able to do is actually get through the full sequence of the deposits.
Where is the bedrock? Where is the natural?
The natural is right down at the bottom of that hole with the muddy puddles.
So really, you haven't managed to find the surface that you were looking for?
We have.
Where is it in the trench?
We're actually standing on it.
Really? Here, what is there here that tells you that this is some kind of archaeological surface?
Well, look here. You've got big lumps of charcoal, you've got brick and tile, and here you've got an enormous chunk of pottery, and then over there you've actually got a piece of iron slag, but you've also got buildings here as well.
Where are your buildings?
Well, actually, one of the crucial pieces of evidence is where you're standing. You're standing on it.
Oh, this thing here?
Yep.
So what do you think that is, Pete?
Well, there's a series of these large flat stones that seem to be set into the surface, and we're thinking that they might be post pads. So you'd have a big timber, and rather than driving a hole in the ground and putting it in, you'd simply have a flat stone which you can then rest your pad on, and as long as the superstructure and the roof is heavy enough, it should stay in position.
But what it means is that this monumental complex, the courtyard surface, may actually have had quite rudimentary buildings. It gives you a totally different impression of what was going on in here. People were, well, I don't know about living here, but certainly working here. There would have been buildings in here.
So our large courtyard and its associated buildings may be looking less grand and imposing, more rustic and workaday. But we've been wrong before, and at this stage we've still got no idea what kind of structure it was. Keep digging, Phil. It's not just the remains of the military buildings that are so fascinating on this site. We've been getting a lot of small finds as well, although, frankly, Rakshar, your find isn't exactly small, is it?
Not really.
What is it?
Well, Tony, we were cleaning away this section, hoping to find the remains of a robbed-out wall, and came down on this large white object. It appears to be a section of Roman water piping.
Have we any idea what it would have been for?
Water supply, water drainage. We know that there was a baths to the north of the site. We've got high-status buildings, which will need very often have water supplies to them.
This isn't the whole thing, though, is it?
No, it isn't, because this is still carrying on in that direction, and it's also going off in that direction. I mean, it's such a surprise. We're so happy. We thought we were going through the kind of backfill from the 1920s excavation of the amphitheater, and we've come down onto Roman layers. We've got this stonking great pipe, and I can't really express how significant this is. I've never excavated one of these before in my archaeological career.
Rakshar and Rob have found a vital clue. The lead pipe means we've got fairly grand buildings at the edge of the courtyard. Certainly more than mere rustic huts. But over at Phil's trench, the quest for a floor surface isn't going quite to plan. He keeps turning up rough, unworked stone.
This one, I think, was just tipped over, so he wants to tip back. Yeah.
Yet in most cases, wherever you pop in a trench at Caerleon, there seem to be rich pickings. The Cardiff archaeologists have had hundreds of small finds out of their trenches this year.
What's this?
This is actually an open work belt plate. You can see it's pierced. It would have been on a Roman soldier's belt. So it would have been silvered originally, and contrasting against the leather of the belt, it would have been quite spectacular. And those plates went all the way around the belt. The military belt was the symbol of being a member of the Roman army and all the status that goes with that. If a soldier was disgraced, well, part of his punishment might be to stand in public without his military belt, and that was a major way of disgracing a soldier.
Wow, beltless shame. What about these? I mean, obviously that looks to me like a brooch.
Yes, it's a horse brooch. This is probably one of the latest finds from this site and possibly dates to the 4th century. Then we have some other animal brooches, some very nice zoomorphic brooches, again of about the same period.
Zoomorphic being they're in the shape of an animal.
In the shape of an animal. And they respected a lot of the natural world, and they looked at the traits of different animals and admired many of their qualities, and that's reflected in some of the brooches they chose to wear.
The finds have helped Peter and his team build up a detailed picture of daily life here in the fortress. But there's only one way to truly experience a legionary's lot, and that's to spend some time being ordered around by a bossy centurion. Alex Langlands is about to enter the man-to-man combat phase of his legionary training.
Okay, so throw the javelin.
And then you just draw your gladius.
I've got my shield up here like that.
So you use your shield to knock him in the face,
So
and
come in like that
stab
and-
him with the sword.
And give it a bit of that there like that.
Sword.
Pretty nasty. But I've also got a dagger here as well. Now, what would that be
Well, if
useful?
you broke or lost your sword, or
Yep.
if the enemy were really pressed up close together,
Right.
you can see from the shape of the dagger, once again, it's a stabbing weapon,
Yep.
and that would be useful for stabbing, once again, into
Sort of
the
up here,
stomach
or
or
into
into the neck.
In there.
But
up
yes,
into the stomach.
that would be ideal.
Nice and soft.
Right. So, Alex, we're going to put you in there and see if you can do some training with the
Great stuff.
with the wooden sword and wicker shield.
Right, okay.
So, if you both want to get stuck into each other.
Nothing personal then. No.
Come on, get stuck in. Harder, harder. Come on. This is not the Girl Guides. And again, boy. And again. And again.
I think it's got the measure of me, this one.
What are you trying, Alex? Use the sword. Come on. Stick in there. Push and stab. Push and stab. Use that shield. Use that shield.
Okay. Oh, I submit. I yield to the might of the legions.
Well, that was quite good.
Whew.
It just goes to show, they do say even a trained man in a battle could only fight for about 10 minutes or so, when he would need to draw back and let other ranks come forward to take over the fighting.
That's absolutely knackering.
Yes.
Absolutely knackering, I have to
well,
say.
Your fitness levels are not quite as good as you thought they might be.
Can I get a job in the camp kitchen? Honestly, I cook a mean soup.
If there's one man who's never daunted by hard labour, it's the centurion of the trenches, Phil Harding. He's been motoring ahead today, but is he any closer to explaining what went on in this giant courtyard? Phil, yesterday morning you started excavating this trench because Geophys told you that there might be a magnificent building here, and we've got the top of it. But then you moved over here in order to try and find the surface associated with it, thinking, I imagine, that it might be flagstones or whatever. But what you found was something entirely different.
Yeah, I mean, really what we've got is an earthen yard. I mean, we've got areas where people are actually living, areas of burning and what have you. It's a much more utilitarian, ordinary sort of yard surface.
And what have you found here?
Well, we do have an enormous pile of stones. Now, logically, all the building material around here is stone, apart from the tiles here. So it could well be that this is a dump of stones that have come from another building.
But the big question is, what do we do in this trench tomorrow?
Well, the big question is in front of us. What is that building?
Yeah.
It's why we came and why we put this trench here in the first place. The good sign is that we've actually got our floor levels at a low level and walls at a higher level.
So there should be at least this much of it.
We think we are likely to be able to get standing walls maybe a foot high.
Really exciting. And now there's just one more day left to solve this archaeological mystery. 8 a.m. on the dig site. Time to rouse the troops. It's nearing the end of a very exciting summer for the Cardiff University team working here. They've already succeeded in learning much more about this startling site, and even at this late hour, the finds just keep tumbling out of the ground. Over at the quayside trench, they've just unearthed another direct link to the Roman legions. It's ages since I've been on a site where there's been such a wealth of small finds, but the one that always gets Romanists going is something like this, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. This is a small piece of old red sandstone with 3 letters on it. We can see part of the letter A V or a U, and then probably a G at the end.
Do those letters have any particular significance to you?
It's extremely significant because it's an abbreviation for the word Augustus, or another word Augusta, so of or the emperor or by the emperor.
And what was the relationship between Augustus and this place?
The second Augustan legion that was based here was raised by the Emperor Augustus at the end of the 1st century BC, and also various monumental inscriptions were erected in Roman Britain and around the empire in the emperor's name, and subsequent emperors took Augustus as one of their titles.
Where do you think this inscription would have been?
And it would have come from a much larger inscription that probably sat, we think, above the main entranceway into the courtyard complex that Phil's trench is in. And it essentially would have allowed people to recognise who had built this, and there would have been perhaps a processional route from this part of the port on into the major complex, funneling people in. Obviously, it's all about Roman imperialism and projecting imperial power.
Cut out them there with them stones, then. So, how many courses have we got here then? We got 1, 2, 3, and we certainly got a 4th one there. Ah! Now then, that is a stone, and it's going under the wall. So, that wall is built on all that stonework. Now, that's something I never expected. I thought they might have levelled it up a bit better than that and put some decent foundations down, but wow, it looks like they've just chucked in a lot of rubble and built the wall up on that, but there's no argument at all. That is the bottom of the wall, and there's a big piece of stone going underneath it. That is the information we want. That's good. That really is good.
So another clue that this building may not have been as grand as we thought it was. I really think I'm beginning to get a handle on this site, and the key to it is the River Usk, which when you're working in this field, you're not at all aware of, but in fact it's just behind that hedge line there. And in Roman times, people would have sailed here from the continent up the Usk, they would have landed at that port, they would have stepped on British soil right here for the first time, they would have come through this huge archway, they would have entered the monumental complex, and they would have been confronted by the enigmatic building that Phil's been working on for the last 3 days. Phil, this has been what we've been waiting for, isn't it? The moment when we began to uncover all the debris around this building.
Yeah, the first good news is that it's not square anymore.
You're kidding?
No, I'm not kidding. It is now oblong. It is twice the size that we originally thought.
How? Why? Where?
Well, you know, originally we had this square building that showed on the Geophysics. And you can see I'm standing in one room of it. We've got one wall going along there, one room going along there. Now we can actually find that we've got a similar size room of exactly the same dimensions tagged on in this direction. You can see the wall going off in that direction there.
Is it just me, or does the line of it respect the entrance up from the port?
That is so important, Tony. The fact that the alignment of this rectangular building does respect the symmetry of the whole courtyard.
So, whatever this building was, it was part of this enormous imperial statement slap bang in the middle of Caerleon.
Absolutely.
So the scale of our mystery structure implies that it was something rather important. But not all the evidence points that way. We still don't have a clear idea of its function. Just half a day left for us to work out exactly what the Romans were up to in these rather muddy fields. And it's getting muddier by the minute. Another dose of invigorating Welsh rain. Still, it's not enough to stop Matt and Kaz toiling away. Matt, you seem to have been up to your knees in drains for 2.5 days now.
Well, there's a drain coming through here, and early this afternoon we discovered this other one here, and you can see there's a top across it where Cass is.
Matt, before we go on, you've got to promise me one thing. You will never go anywhere near a karaoke machine ever again.
You've just got to keep me away from Cardiff students.
Kaz, what have you got?
Well, this wall we saw yesterday, that was the division between the building and the courtyard to the right of me, we thought this was originally wall tumble that had come off the wall, but actually removing half of it today, we've got tiles covering a drain.
Why have we got so much water management?
Well, I have a theory. We've got drains there, drains here. We have this pavement with a lip on it that I showed you yesterday. And there we have the courtyard. The surface that I showed you has actually turned out to be nothing. All we have is silt, clay, almost kind of river-type deposits. I think that this whole courtyard area was subject to some pretty bad flooding.
But the river's about 100 metres from where we are now.
It is, Tony, but we know that from Roman Britain, the climate changed from the mid-3rd century onwards, so we're getting much wetter weather, and actually that could explain that this part of Caerleon here may well have flooded.
So could that be the reason why this once great Roman settlement fell into disuse?
Yes, indeed it could, and we've actually managed to take some samples out of these drains, and hopefully that will help tell us when and if that happened.
That's great. Matt, the whole of the decline and fall of this part of the Roman Empire could be writ large in your trench.
Just the top 5 metres.
It's a good result. And Peter's now getting a really clear picture of this monumental courtyard area. But what of the mystery building in the heart of the complex? Time's now up for our contribution to the dig. Has Phil got any answers? Well, it's a lovely piece of archaeology, Phil. But what does it tell us about this building?
Well, it tells us that it was never quite as grand as perhaps we once thought it was. I mean, the story is quite clear. Once they decided that this was where they were actually going to build their building, and they looked around and they realised that this is a boggy floodplain. So they flung down some of that big stone rubble over there. That gave them a firm foundation. And then they built up about 4 or 5 courses of the tiles. You can see where they actually bed onto the stonework. And on the top of that, they built a timber frame superstructure.
Ah, so this is probably all the wall that there ever was.
This is the only wall that there was. It strikes me, anyway, as what you'd expect in Caerleon, a very symmetrical building. And it's not flamboyant, it is very military to me.
And we know that it's aligned to the entranceway, Pete. What does that say about this building?
Well, it still puts it in the central part of this big courtyard, so it's clearly important. It's the first building you would have seen had you got off a ship or a barge in the middle of the port, looking in this direction, and it tells us a great deal about what was going on in the courtyard. Where are the fancy floors? We can't find those at all. So we're looking at a building that might have a more of a functional role, perhaps something to do with this space being used as a stockade or a corral, rather than the big open yard where legionaries might have paraded.
So the courtyard and the building in the middle of it were most likely to be used for controlling goods and people coming in and out of the fortress. Perhaps it was a customs post or holding area. But crucially, the new evidence from the dig suggests Caerleon was even more important than previously thought. A place with a large port and an administrative centre, as well as being a mighty fortress. It was a crucial landmark in Roman Britain, and only thanks to the dig has the full scale of this imposing site become clear.